Redux. Sofas, Kichima. Sibram Kondo, Halaye. Shoot to kill, Umasa. Shoot to kill, Kilame. Kiss the poor, the farmer. Kiss the poor, the farmer. Brr, pa, pa, brr, pa, pa. Attention.
Okay. Avoid legal snags by telling the people they're being recorded. Mr. Hoca, Scrotal 1, this is Scrotal 2, you're being recorded right now. Do I have your consent?
You have my consent since you're doing a radio show.
Okay. Yes. I just want to let you know I'm dressed really nice tonight for this recording. You know, I got to look my best for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you called me Scrotal. Thank you for calling me Scrotal.
You're no problem.
That's my proprietary term. You know, I got a young guy in Texas already that is using that term scrotal sack. He says, Steve, you're right. These are just a bunch of scrotal sacks. He's talking about guys at Simp. They're driving on their hive brain. he goes, these guys are just scrotal sacks.
Yeah, I think it's an appropriate term. Scrotal on scrotal. I've always enjoyed
scrotal violence.
I've always
when they come to arrest people, it's going to be scrotum on scrotum violence.
Yeah, it'll be some fucking white dude with a bald head who abuses steroids that's gonna come knocking on your door with a battering ram or those door knockers. I don't know what they're called.
He'll have an elongated mid face, you know, some like really stretched out look. He's some guy that would have joined Antifa if he wasn't in the military.
Right. He's the type of guy that gets off to cuck porn.
Yeah.
Well,
so you wanted to ask me a question about something, or you're going to just take it away?
Yeah, take it away.
I guess I could take it away. You wanted to talk about your last interview you did with that guy. And first of all, did you agree with most of what he said, or were you guys it seemed like it was very contentious?
Well, I've been following Tom for maybe like 6 months. He's pretty insightful.
No, not Tom. Okay, we can talk about Tom. We'll get into Tom, whatever his name is, Kozinski. The other guy,
Ohio Dan.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I was just saying how I found you. I have a MGTOW, unprotected MGTOW playlist, and one of your clips is on there, and it was not you who uploaded it. It was a guy named Ohio Dan. And then I.M. sent me a video of yours, and again, it wasn't from your channel. It was from, again, this guy Ohio Dan. And maybe like 6 months after that, someone in the live stream said that I sounded a lot like you.
Yeah. I'm a high-strung Italian guy. I'm a Ukrainian, but you know, you and I got the same chemistry. We don't talk. We've got really a lot of energy, and it drives people nuts. By the way, they can't stand me, and it's because they're not used to the high energy I bring. But that's how my sister was. You know, my older sister was like that. My late sister, she was very animated too, but of course she was an attractive woman, so she can get away with it. You know.
Yeah, but I think me and you share a lot of the same philosophy on a lot of different things, especially when it comes to the manosphere, that women are in fact just not having sex, and a lot of people in the MGTOW, TFL, Incel, PUA, again, the manosphere, think they're under this notion that most women are out there banging everything. But if we actually just look at reproduction, that doesn't reflect. Not every single woman could be on birth control. Not every single woman can be having abortions, and they're not getting married. You know, never forget the fact that people having marriage was also a means to have sex, like to make sure that everyone got laid, and that's just clearly not the case.
Certain types of birth control actually mess your hormones up. You're not as when a woman gets pregnant, it's because she's very, very in the mood to get pregnant. And that's just the way it is. I mean, you'll see they'll do satires where a guy will come home from work and the woman will jump on the guy and she's ready to get pregnant because that's how it is that women they biologically know when they can get pregnant. And so I think that the low birth rate is indicative of less sex. People say that's a stupid argument. No, it's not. Yes, it's possible that a family of 13 kids the husband and the wife may just strictly procreate for the kids, but I tend to think there's still a lot of sex going on in a family with 13 kids,
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with you. And one thing I've noticed since I relocated, and naturally I am using the dating apps, is that a lot of these profiles I bump into on the more serious dating apps, that women are pro lefty, BLM, and obviously like the whole wokeism, but they want a man. Like, if you supported Trump, don't message me, but you want a guy. So naturally, if you want a guy, they're probably not going to be on board for what Kamala Harris is planning to roll out on the American people.
Right.
So there's this cognitive dissonance that you see with women where they want a man who's burly, strong, masculine, but votes far left. Like,
Well, I
doesn't
don't
really
even
work.
think they really care about a burly man anymore. That's where the oofy doofy theory comes from, is that I don't think that in our society now, the burly guy he's more seen as a threat. There's a lot of very masculine men out there that are not doing too well in the marriage and the dating game.
Well, I do think women are looking for a masculine guy, but they're cognitive and they don't really understand kind of like what men are really about. Men are much more primitive in their reproductive strategies and getting laid strategies. Like, I always joke, like, home goods would not exist if women didn't dominate the consumer market. Guys would be happy with, a wall that's not painted and the mattresses
Oh
on
my
the
God.
floor.
Yeah. When I was single for a long time, I was like that too. I would put maybe a couple pictures up of, but I'm telling you, you don't want to decorate too much. I knew one guy that was single, but now here's the catch. He was eternally single, but he always had girls over his place. So this guy had to make his place look really homey. He had like all this like beautiful rugs and all over his apartment and stuff. But again, if you're a single guy and you haven't dated in a while, you're probably not going to care what's on your walls.
Right, exactly. 100%.
It was
100%. It's just strange. I think as things become more unstable, and I'm sure there's a lot of women that have somewhat got one eye open, wondering what the hell's going on. Sure, they might be looking for a masculine guy, but at the same time, they got to be pro wokeism, which again,
right.
they're not going to find that because most masculine guys are not going to be okay with a lot of the prevailing social problems that we're witnessing.
I think masculine men would fall into fringe groups nowadays, like the guy with the Harley and the beard. He even those guys are limited as far as women. I don't see those guys like Hell by the Dashboard Light said that you'll see these burly guys on Harleys, but there's never a woman on the back unless it's like maybe a couple's night, like maybe you got a married couples going out on their Harleys or whatever, or their Hondas, red or gold wings. You're not going to see too many bearded Harley guys with the beautiful girl on the back. That's a kind of a thing, a blast of the past.
Yeah, 100%. So digressing, I for the past 8 months since the lockdown, me and I have been doing this ongoing series called Imperial Conversions. Imperial Conversions stems from this book called Civil War II by Thomas Chittums. Thomas Chittums was a Vietnam veteran. He became a mercenary in the Bush War in Zimbabwe, former Rhodesia. He then went on to become a mercenary during the breakup of Yugoslavia, the balkanization, war in Serbia and Kosovo. And after that experience, he went on to write a book called Civil War II. And the book was written in 1994, 1995, right after he left former Yugoslavia. And he wrote basically, he took all the information from all the wars he was been in the past 20, 25 years and wrote a book and how he correlated a lot of these problems in Vietnam, Rhodesia, Rhodesia and Croatia, Serbia, both Kosovo, and noticed a strong parallel between the United States, where it was in 1995, to what had happened in those nations. So
Yeah.
I gave you the book. Wanted you to read it. Kind of wanted your take on it because you became quite fascinated with the topic of civil war. Now, personally, and I've stated in other recordings I've done with you that I don't see any type of civil war breaking out. And furthermore, we should have seen something at this point, especially with the mass lockdowns and now with basically the election being stolen, and now a far left regime is about to take hold of the United States. What will come of it? I just see a more linear a linear progression, but exasperated and accelerated going forward.
Okay, I'll give you my 2 cents on it. Your friend Tom Kwasinski, he's 40 years old, very sharp guy. He's got a PhD in history and all that. But he seems to think by January 5th, all hell's going to break loose. He thinks that if things don't go the way for the Trump supporters, they're all going to go down in Washington. I think he's smoking crack. I think he's wrong. These people would have done this a long time ago. I think we would have seen remnants of it. Even at Sturgis, when everyone said, "Oh, wait till those Antifa people get to Sturgis." Well, at Sturgis, there were black guys and white guys arguing back and forth face to face, but nobody threw any punches. It was just barking, you know. So this thing would have happened a long time ago. I think the only thing that would make people fight would be to the point of having nothing to lose. And let's face it, most conservatives have nice material things. They have houses paid off. They have 2 vehicles. They have a Harley Davidson, his and her Harleys, or a Goldwing or whatever they're driving, and they don't want to lose that. And I just don't see them fighting at this point. And who wants to fight? I mean, it's honestly, you realize how radical that is to go from just being passive to having to physically fight, you know, at 50 years old or 40 years old.
Yeah, and the other thing you have to factor in is number one, who are you fighting?
Yeah.
Exactly. Are you going to go attack Visa and MasterCard and
No,
American Express?
you're going to be fighting off marauders first. Marauders would take over, and you'd probably run into some sketchy people. First, what will probably happen is neighbors that never talk to you will start being friendly with you. Hey, man, you got any food? You got any supplies? Can you help me out here? And before you know it, that could be a shitstorm too. You don't want to not be cooperative, but at the same time, if you get strange calls from girls that you talked to years ago, all of a sudden are looking for a place to bunk, you better be on the lookout. You know, it's not cool.
Well, before it even gets to any of that, let's go back into the history books. So let's say Visa, MasterCard, BBT Bank, Chase Manhattan, whatever, fucking bank controls the region you're in. Uh, in Europe, you'd be able to go to the bank and burn the bank down and basically destroy your debt, right? If the people were in debt, they would say, we can't pay this debt anymore, and the bank's got to take a haircut. Well, you really can't do that anymore, right? You can't go down to the local bank and
You
burn it to
haven't
the
been able
fucking
to do
ground.
that for 100 years because when they centralize the money, you can always, like, if you burn money, you can always, as long as you know the serial numbers, you can reprint. You really couldn't have done that even 100 years ago. That was something in the medieval times you could probably do.
In the medieval times, that's where I'm talking about the medieval times, right? So in the past, the banks would have to take a haircut, or during the Roman Empire, if you were a wealthy individual, you'd have to kick that money back to keep everyone happy. Right now, they're basically pacifying the people with a measly $600 check, right?
Yeah, I just
And
found out that they're going to give illegal aliens 1,800. It's messed up. It's like this guy, the local radio talk show here, housed here in town. They're a little bit more freer to say what they want, and he says that's interesting. The average American who's a law-abiding citizen has paid generational taxes here is going to get a $600 check, while some illegal alien's going to get like up to 1,800. Which we all know that this is a big handout, and that's just I don't know the details of it, but he was complaining about that.
yeah, I haven't really looked too much into it as far as the kickbacks. I know about the $600. Now Trump is saying it's got to be 2,000. Then there's obviously everyone's freaking about the pork spending. I think again everyone's talking about how Pakistan's getting money for gender studies. 85 million going to Cambodia. 1.3 billion to Egypt. Now, here's the thing. That's not money that's supposed to be going to other nations. That's U.S. taxpayer money. But the thing is that we're just printing money and just pulling numbers out of our ass, and
Mhm.
it just seems that we're actually in a state of communism. We just don't know it. We have this thing called perfect competition. And I discussed this with you, Steve, that there's not much of a difference between Target and Walmart. There's not much of a difference between eBay and Amazon.
Yeah, but
So, yeah, go
let me
on.
interject one thing. At some point, that communism will have to get physical on their end, which means is a lot of people can take this type of communism now, but at some point they're going to physically suppress this, which scares the crap out of most people. Communism is about physical force. It's all about pushing you. It's not just some sort of we can control them with just brainwashing them. They will use force at some point.
Right, and the force will probably have to be when you have to part with your private property, and that's what communism can be boiled down to. It's very simple. It's no private property.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about when we talk about communism. So when we're taking the wealth of the United States and redistributing it around the globe, we've been doing that for the past 30 years. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, these things have already been happening. Right now, because there's absolutely no pushback, and both the left-right paradigm is a total farce. For people to still believe in such things, it's quite it's fucking hilarious that if you believe that the Republicans are that much different from the Democrats, you obviously are mistaken wrong and you're not really paying attention to the bigger picture. But the problem is that when there's still food and we still have an abundance of certain things, people don't seem to notice it. And again, this goes back to the boiling frog scenario, where if you the incrementalism, you just keep going up and up and up, and recently you've kind of burnt the frog's legs, let us say, but the frog is still alive, that frog being the middle class, right?
Right.
And how this kind of ties into the whole manosphere thing is that as we further lurch into this neoliberal order, the boutique economy with the Taco Bell infrastructure, as I like to say, the subscription-based economy, the lack of pair bonding between the two sexes. As more and more people lack pair bonding, you're going to see much more social unrest. Let us say you're going to see more instability within the federal government because again, the mud sill has been eroded. You have termites in the foundation. The termites is feminism, more or less. The termites is social media trying to pry the family unit apart, and we're trying to commodify everything. So anything that is intangible, whether that be your statues, your church, even your music, your food, your ethnic food, whatever that is, if it's fried chicken in the South, if it's jambalaya in Louisiana, or whether it's pizza in the Northeast, you see that that's really what they're attacking. And that's kind of
How
just
about
like a small little microcosm of what
right?
is really what they're trying to attack. Again, is the intangible to your culture. So you commodify everything. You commodify the relationship. That's what OnlyFans is about. You commodify the family. You outsource everything inside the family. You don't need the wife taking care of the kids. You can send them to a private daycare or a government daycare program. This is kind of what I've noticed the
There
past
was a guy
2 years.
there was a guy named Davis Arini. He made a good video like back in 2011 or 12. He says that what they didn't realize, women, when they had to outsource their child care, they took a non-taxable resource, which was a labor, which was child care, and turned it into a taxable resource. So basically they had to take their child care, outsource their child care to someone else, and that became an expensive resource that the government could tax because it's a business. But prior to that, it was not a taxable resource because childcare was just, I got 4 or 5 kids, I stay home and take care of them. And I think that this now is getting where everything has been commoditized, and everything from, just, the relationship now has become, and it makes no sense in this sense. If obviously they want to control the population, but it makes sense to have families and then you can tax them later. But they want to make the money off of it now, which is, it defeats the whole purpose in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It defeats the purpose. So digressing, what did you think of the whole chat with Tom? Because Tom is
I thought
he's a big,
overall, I think overall it was good. Tom talks so fast and he doesn't pause between sentences.
I know he doesn't.
He
It's
doesn't.
hard to keep up.
Yeah, he talks fast and he doesn't pause. And there was a time where I wanted to see Tom slow down and just pause for maybe 3 seconds so I can digest this. He's saying it so fast, and he doesn't know that. I think Tom needs to understand that this is irritating. It's really irritating that you can't digest what he's saying, and I had to listen to it several times to kind of get it. But yeah, it made sense. It was a good chat. There's a lot of criticism. I guess does he ally himself with white nationalism, or is he kind of on the fence with that? What is overall is his position on that?
To be honest with you, I don't really know. Like I said, I found him 6 months ago by accident, and he gets silenced pretty hard. He lost a lot of his podcast. He's a great author. I know a couple of people that bought his books. I don't own any of his books, just because I listen to his podcast and I can talk to him when I want. I think people. No, let's put it to you this way. He believes that maybe white people should have their own little area. That's
Right.
kind of
Very
just the gist of
unrealistic.
it.
Yeah, he almost seems like you can start this little utopia, and he, of course, uses the state of Maine. But of course, you don't want every white person moving to Maine either. How would you like white Californians to move to Maine? That'll be a real Tinder store, a shit fest right there. I mean, we see what the Californians are doing right now. And I was telling you early before we were recording that one of my friends told me that what Californians used to do like 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they would go on these mini reconnaissance missions where maybe these upwardly mobile professionals from LA would drive 300 miles north and try to do their little mini reconnaissance. And he said he could tell. I mean, people laughed at this. It was so obvious. You'd see some strange people in your town, and you knew they were just trying to check out. And this is what they've done to Montana. They've turned Montana. Everybody's buying property in these places. Like, well, obviously, Austin, Texas is being inculcated with blue people. So now you're potentially looking at Texas and Montana becoming blue states, which is crazy, but it could very easily happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, now even with the diaspora out of blue strongholds, I just read an article. It's 160,000 people left New York since the whole COVID lockdown. So it's 160,000 people leaving since March. Now,
Right.
that is a significant amount if you break it up per day. That's a lot of people. And now those are people that changed their licenses. So there's people that have left and moved to other states that haven't even changed their licenses over yet due to COVID, right? Or too lazy, or they're collecting welfare from New York State where it's much higher. You get a higher amount of money being on the dole versus, let's say, if you're in Georgia. So people are collecting that welfare and moving to another state where they're living much more comfortably, right? So we're seeing a huge diaspora of people out of California, New York, and probably Illinois can get thrown into that. And those people are pretty much your educated middle class. So you have a bit of a brain drain happening where the people that have learned, people that were educated in New York and were once middle class. Now, mind you, I think Stefan Molyneux makes this point, is that, okay, like take me, for example. Now, I got my education in the public sector. Public education is a much higher level of public education than, let's say, you're from fucking Tennessee. That's just a fact. I'm sorry if you get fucking butthurt if you hear that, but most people that do book writings, podcasts, and all the things that you love don't actually come from, let's say, Missouri or Kansas. They come from either New York or California, and Texas to a lesser extent. I don't want to leave Texas out, but now that I've grew up in New York and the state pretty much groomed me to be a foot soldier for the economy of that state but I can't live there anymore. So what do? I leave, right? That's a net loss for the state of New York.
Yeah,
So
it
if you're
is. But
having all these type of people leaving that can't really hack it in New York because a house is $600,000 and you need to make $150,000 as a single guy in order to sustain yourself, that's not a sustainable long-term situation. Now in California is planning on taxing people that leave the state. So you're pretty much giving people a kick in the ass on the way out
well,
instead
that's
of
on
trying to
pension.
ruin their,
They were
don't
talking about that with pension funds. Like if you were receiving a lifetime pension from the state of California and you moved to Montana, that they would actually tax you more, or they would still tax you on your pension for that state. Because in a way, it makes sense because they're losing revenue immediately, but it's kind of then you're paying tax on your other pension in that other state. So, but you're right. So you're telling me this is like a penalty tax for leaving the state?
Right. So they're not penalizing people. And yes, if you leave New York State and leave and go to another state, you do get penalized in your taxes. But this doesn't solve the problem. And the left is not about solving problems because in order to fill the void left by that pensioner or that person such as myself who should be, you know, getting married, buying a house, pretty much basically being a person that's contributing to the state, I leave. So what does New York State do? What does California do? Well, they bring people from the third world in. That's why you
Right.
see New
That's
York
that's
now is only
that's
54% white. Go on.
yeah. You can thank the Lutheran Church for that. I don't blame churches. It's a money grab, is all it is. It's not. It's got nothing to do with the Lutherans. These Lutherans know that these people from Somalia are never going to become Christians. They know it. They just do it for the money. And like there's 80,000 Somalians or 100,000 Somalians in the Minneapolis St. Paul area. That is a radical change. That I don't know what's wrong with people in Minnesota, but that is a very liberal state.
Oh, Minnesota. Yeah, yeah. I think there's actually something more nefarious going on when it comes to like the states of Michigan and Minnesota. Um, and that's kind of going off topic, but
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
no, we can get into that in a moment. But going back to Tom, and I mean Tom makes a point. Well, Maine has the lowest amount of crime in any state in the U.S. Well,
Not for me. Oh,
that's because it's predominantly white,
yeah.
and
But it's not going to last. I mean, all these paradises out in the country. I imagine you could probably, what people don't understand is they'll say, "Well, I'll move out to this other part of the country." Do you think that everybody's going to want all these new people coming into their little paradise? No, I mean, I don't blame them because there's two groups of people that can screw up and kind of demographically things. The ultra wealthy, which buy up all the coastal property and the lake properties, and of course the people who are not Christian, particularly dark skinned people. I hate to say it, but when you bring all these third world people into a country like Arabs and Somalis, and then none of them are Christians, and then you bring wealthy people you can really destroy that quaint feeling. You know what I'm saying?
mhm.
Wealthy people can rich white people can really screw something up too. They can come into a state like Montana and buy thousands of acres of ranch, and before you know it, what are you going to be, a subsistence farmer for some asshole from California?
Yeah, and a lot of people from Maine have had it with people from New York moving there, moving up and buying up houses
But
like
Maine was a beautiful state in the 70s. We went on a family vacation in Maine, and it was a beautiful state. But they're already dumping Somalians in Maine now too. I mean, there's just no, they're just it's gonna. This is disgusting. These elites are going for broke. They are doing this. And I don't understand the psychology of white liberals. I've never understood. You got 35-year career school teachers, women school teachers, that I had one woman say at the election booth, she says, "I'm voting for Joseph Biden because he's a moral man." That was her exact words, a moral man. I thought, are you off your rocker? But this is the liberals are like, there's brain rot in them. They've been so inculcated with propaganda over 30 years of teaching in a public school. They can't. I'd say most of your teachers are liberals. I don't think there's any conservative teachers anymore.
what in public or in college?
In public and college, even private colleges. I don't think that anything exists where you have ultra conservatism like John Birch Society type stuff. I think that that stuff is all gone now. I mean, the John Birch Society is like on its. I don't even think it has any power at all.
Well, they
Never
definitely
really
have a huge subscription account. I've seen their subscription count explode the past couple of years. I think they went from like 10,000 subscribers to like 100,000 in a blink. I don't know whether that's astroturfed or not,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of YouTube channels that have been astroturfed the last couple of years, both left and right.
We have to admit one thing with this problem in the future. Race is an issue, whether we want to accept it or not. If we want to sit there and say this is not a racial problem, this is just a cultural difference problem, it really is, because with race comes culture. And, you know, ideologies are not as powerful. I mean, if it boils down to civil war, people aren't going to be, the niceties of polite society are going to disappear real quick. I mean, you can see when people, you ever see when people are desperate, they will turn on you just because the niceties disappear. And this is exactly what, I'm not saying needs to happen. It may by just pure chance happen, but we're still in the nicey state. If you ask a ultra conservative, do you think that this is an issue of race? They'll say, no, it's not. It's just ideology. No, I think it's a race issue too. And I think the fact that whites are now less than 60% of the population in America is reflecting this problem right here.
Yeah, I wonder how much it's going to be after the boomers die off. And we can see during the COVID lockdown, they're discussing. Actually, I shouldn't say they're discussing. They actually went ahead and did it. There was a curfew the past month where I live, 9 p.m. curfew, because apparently COVID only comes out after 9 p.m. Now they're limiting restaurant capacity from 50% to 30%, and you can only sit 2 people at a table. Well, who does this hurt? Well, it hurts people that did not go to college or working part-time and going to college, who are in debt and young. So you're hurting young millennials and Zoomers that are trying to make a buck, because when I did the chat with Incel Maddox, a lot of people were talking about the NEETs, right?
Yeah.
Or as I like to call them, the 13th graders. Well, that's the overriding majority under the people under the age of 30 that had no into a certain business or get some type of formal training doing whatever. Unions are dead. Me and you discussed that previously off air. So what you're doing is hurting people that really have no skill, because people that work in the restaurants are usually people that lack a certain specific skill or are in debt from getting educated, going to college and getting degrees in some type of fucking bullshit, right? So that's kind of what I see. So what does this do? This fuels the far left's agenda, where they want some type of fucking revolution.
Right. Well, see, here's the problem with the left. They don't really have an outcome. They just kind of want to wing this thing and say it'll figure itself out. I mean, if the left realized how stupid they were, do these people running around in Antifa uniforms and BLM doesn't believe in, you know, these aren't black Christians. These are black secular. I mean, this is a communist movement. If these people knew the outcome was to starve their neighborhoods, which is going to happen, the starvation will start in the inner city. That's where it will start. And of course, they know how to do this, because then they'll go to the suburbs in the country. But they are going to systematically kill these people. I mean, that's my opinion. And
well, I don't think we're ever going to get there. I think we're just going to go back to the incrementalism. It's not going to be. And me and you talked about this before we started recording, that you're in favor of what I've been stating, that it's just going to be this incrementalism, because if you mechanized all of agriculture, and again, we live in this perfect competition, sustainable type of scenario where you can just paper over things indefinitely, why would there be a some type of insurrection or civil war?
because I tell you, one of the problems with them going the incrementalism route is that it gives people too much time to plan a strategy. They may want to blitzkrieg this in now, which I think was what the vaccine is all about. Let's blitzkrieg things. Let's make as many people sick as we can. Then we'll have to force them to take more vaccine, telling them it's COVID-27, COVID-23, 21, or whatever, and they'll continue to do this. That's why I think another blitzkrieg route would be is if they declare war in the Middle East or some major war, and China starts a war. That's a blitzkrieg, means that you won't have time to react to it. And I think what you're saying is that they just want incrementalism. But the way things are going down, I don't call this incrementalism in the last 8 months. I think this is moving pretty fast.
Yes and no. Part of me feels that COVID was a stress test to see if they can actually get away with putting 50 million people on the dole on unemployment, and they realized that wow, this actually can work. So why don't we go full-fledged woke and really ramrod our fucking diversity agenda, and no one's going to do anything about it.
Okay, but okay, Lamprey, I want to say this. This is just your opinion and your theory, just as much as mine is. And nothing is certain, because I've been on this internet for a long time, and people have been making predictions of how the future is going to look. And like the MGTOWs thought there would be this MGTOW, women would be begging men to come back. It never happened. And it probably won't ever happen at this point. So you're making your prediction is, and it's just your opinion, that this will be incrementally done. I think that they're going to try to move very quickly on it, because the vaccine is something that they need to get into people to get them under control. Because if it is a nanobots in there, then once they get everybody with nanobots in them, they can start pushing buttons electronically from a server somewhere in Silicon Valley, and they can control people. And that sounds creepy, but I bet you they've already experimented with people in Africa with this technology already.
Yeah, you're right. We don't get much news out of Africa, do we?
No, but we don't have to, because Bill Gates has got his thumbs in Africa. His wife and him talked about how they're so involved in the African people, which we all know it's for their own causes. And of course, they sugarcoated it by saying, oh, these sweet African women just want to control their birth rates, which is BS. They want to make babies. Africans have a very big culture. They're a very big culture on having big families. So don't even feed me that this African woman wants to have only 1.2 kids. It's just nonsense. They like having kids. That's just part of their community, whether it's starvation or not. So I think that my theory is they want to blitzkrieg this in fast. You say they want to incrementally do it. The incrementalization means what? Okay, what's the next incremental step? How's this in the next year? What's the incrementalization going to look like in your opinion?
More taxation, more wokeness. Again, the push for interracial marriages or interracial, obviously mixed race babies. I mean, that's become quite obvious.
People they don't want babies. Here's the thing. They don't even want people making babies at all. So I listen, I would listen, having interracial kids might be the next best thing to having all, say, white babies, but they don't want people to procreate at all. This COVID-19, what does it prove in the first year of 9-10 months of COVID, and we have a baby bust, not a baby boom. This is crazy.
Well, I think they rather push the whole interracial marriage thing for the mere fact that the mystery meat child is probably going to identify with black because of a whole fucking, my great granddaddy was a slave, and also we already know that the marriage rate for people that are interracial is like 200%, and there's a higher chance of that child not really becoming, let us say, successful down the long run. I mean, there's only really one country that's technically multiracial, and that's the Dominican Republic. And the only reason why the Dominican Republic has a culture of its own is because of the Catholic Church, and the fact that they hate Haiti, which is their neighboring country. So, and inside Dominican Republic, it has a long, bloody history of, ethnic cleansing and race cleansing, which no one really wants to talk about. And even, I think, 5 or 6 years ago, the DR was planning on invading Haiti and pretty much just wiping the Haitians, wiping Haiti off the planet, because it's the most impoverished nation in the Western Hemisphere. But the fact is that once you start promoting those type of things, is that now that child doesn't really have an identity, and it's going to identify with whatever the prevailing culture zeitgeist is, which is this whole victimization and white people are evil kind of a thing.
Lamprey, this is what you're telling me about promoting multiculturalism. This is 10-year-old, 20 years old. This is nothing new. So you say they're going to continue to promote it. They're not promoting anything right now. I don't see any promotion of let's make babies, but let's do it the interracial way. I don't see it happening. I see the agenda seems to be fearful and don't multiply. They want to. So how are you going to have families when you're socially distancing people? How the hell are you going to make babies and have sexual intercourse when you have to socially distance from everybody?
Mhm.
It doesn't make any sense what you're saying. I don't see that. They would have to literally say, "Hey, it's time to take the masks off now. Now you can go back." I don't see. I think the masks are going to be here for a long time.
I agree. Even after the vaccine,
Right. Which
even
brings up,
after the vaccine, they're going to keep the mask on. I don't think the masks are ever going to come off.
no, I don't think so either. And it's going to fuel a generation of people that are literally not going to be able to. I mean, it's going to get bad. I mean, I do see it being it's not going to be a very comfortable situation.
Well, the president of Belarus made a statement recently. Alexander Lukashenko said that the World Bank offered him a bribe of $940 million in COVID relief aid under conditions that he imposed extreme lockdowns and forced people to wear a mask and impose strict curfews and basically crash the economy of Belarus. I don't know how much more further you want to crash that economy because it's already a very poor nation.
They're
But
very resilient people too.
again,
It's a white nation.
because he didn't take that money, they're having somewhat of a light color revolution that's really not gaining a stronghold because the people of Belarus have somewhat woken up to that. Now,
Right.
going forward with the whole Belarus thing, I just watched a movie a few nights ago called Come and See. Did you ever see the movie Come and See?
Come and see. No, I
Come and
haven't seen.
See. Google it real quick.
Okay, come and see or come and see.
Come and See.
Okay, so let me hold on. Let me get the back button on here. Hold on.
And
Hold on.
the movie is based on it's a fictional story, but it's about nonfiction. So it's a fictional story within a historical time frame, which is Belarus 1942, about how when the Nazis invaded Belarus, how they just slaughtered peasant villages, right?
Right.
And going by what you were talking about earlier, that it's going to be somewhat of a race war. Well, we look at what Nazi Germany did to Eastern Europeans. It was pure savagery, pure barbarism. So when you hear these alt right and fucking, well, Hitler, he was misunderstood. Like, no, dude, that's not what happened. That's not what fucking happened. The Nazis invaded Eastern Europe and slaughtered Christians also, white Christians, all because they were might have been air quote Bolsheviks or communist
No,
sympathizers.
no, it's even worse than that. He didn't accuse all Eastern Europeans of Bolshevism. He thought that Slavic people were biologically inferior, which is
Yes,
offensive.
thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
And let me interject something. My dad told me this story. He says when the Ukrainian army came into Berlin, actually it was the Russian army, Ukrainian citizens were slaughtering the Germans. They were so angry because the Ukraine had made a pact with the Germans to fight the Russians. And guess what? When the Germans came into Ukraine, they put them in concentration camps? That was the first thing they did. So you're supposed to be our allies. The Germans were really sick people. They really were.
They were. And because we're living in this revisionist time frame, and I'm hearing a lot of rhetoric and I see it on the internet, I see it on BitChute, that there's all these fucking, white nationalist alt-right guys, trying to fucking retool history about how, oh, that was all propaganda. Like, no,
No,
dude, the Nazis really did that shit. Like,
yeah,
you're fucking
not
retarded.
great.
684 peasant villages were razed and destroyed by the
Yeah.
Nazis.
When the Nazis invaded Poland, they killed 50,000 civilians like off the bat. 50,000 civilians were killed. Now the Polish people suffered at the hands of the Russians much worse with the Katyn Forest massacre, which you've probably heard about. They took the smartest Polish people in Poland and lined them up they kidnapped them all, put them on boxcars and killed them. But the Germans were not much better. You were being attacked from both sides, but the Germans didn't like the Polish people at all. And it's something that they really have. It's a very, every time I meet German people, I'm not talking long-term German Americans, but like first generation, I always had this bad feeling in my mouth that, hey, I'm Ukrainian. And yet, you probably think I'm inferior,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, this kind of circles back that you can't really look at things through a race prism because at the end of the day, what's happening in the United States, it's basically white people arguing with other white people and mostly over the internet. So if you look at the Antifa, the Anquifas, and those that support BLM, well, it's really not black people. It's other fucking crazy ass white people.
Right, it is, but you know, I don't know if we're getting off the topic or not. But I guess you could summation like this: the Germans weren't these wonderful people that were just trying to liberate the world. They were trying to liberate communism, and I do believe that I've heard this that Hitler initially did not want to kill Jews; he wanted them out of Germany, which was a fact. He did want them to try to get them out of Germany, but then Hitler just went nuts, and the Germans were desperate, and they followed him, and you know, it was inevitable he was going to lose the war.
Right. So you basically, it was two warring ideologies, and that's what the 20th century can be summed up in, was a bunch of warring ideologies. And now, whether it's fascism, socialism, communism, or capitalism, all four of these terms are all relatively new. I mean, capitalism has been around since the Industrial Revolution, and if you want to include you can lump the Renaissance into with the whole argument where capitalism was birthed out of because of the after the Black Plague, they needed labor, and most people were dead. So in order to get people to go and work, you had to start paying them. That led to the Renaissance, right? And then Marx came around, a few hundred years after the Renaissance, and wrote the Communist Manifesto, and where he got his whole ideas on labor versus usurers and blah blah blah, whatever. But again, these are all relatively new concepts, and if we
Yeah,
look back prior to the Industrial Revolution, there was really only one ideology, which was feudalism. That was it, and we're kind of going back to that. It won't be socialism, won't be communism, and it won't be fascism. It'll be fascist. The neoliberal order is fascist. It's really not communist. Um, but yeah, you'll own nothing. They'll own everything, right? And we
right,
see the
because
merging
here's
of
the thing,
yeah.
when people dump their homes, you may say, oh, that's going to hurt New York. Wealth only redistributes itself. It never loses. I mean, land is just going to be redistributed. That's all that's going to happen. So someone's going to get that land for real cheap.
Right, and then again, it goes back to what I was going to say is it's going to be a form of feudalism, with a, I guess, like a veneer of fascism where the corporate and state powers kind of merge again. Walmart, Amazon, Facebook, Google merging with the state, and that's really what we're seeing transpiring, where they will own
I
everything and you
I
will
think
get nothing.
another thing I predict is going to happen is transients will not be allowed to be transients anymore. See, right now, if all push comes to shove, you can become a street hobo and a transient. I think the days of having the freedom to be a transient is going to die. I see a situation where they will force you to work. They will literally say enough of the transients. They'll kill the druggies, but they'll probably say you cannot be a bum anymore, and you will be forced. I thought of something interesting. You heard of they'll have what's called an unemployed tax. If you're unemployed, you'll have to pay a tax, and you'll have to do that by working. So they'll never allow you to the idleness of to be unemployed. You'll always have to be working. So I could see the future being you don't collect unemployment, you'll pay a penalty for being unemployed.
Or you have to work, which is what I think is
Well,
going to
that's what
happen.
I
You're going to
say.
be
You'll have
forced.
to work off that penalty, and if they get this down. But again, you're talking about the wild cards. Will there be a resistance to it? Do these people have the power to just fly drones and control people? I mean, at some point, even in the Wizard of Oz, they found who the man behind the curtain was, and they were able to show that he was some fucking dweeb. You know, he was the guy behind the curtain was making all the mischief happen in the Wizard of Oz was just some fucking dweeb behind some machinery. You know.
Yeah, some hermit behind the curtain.
Right. It is
Hey,
amazing those
hey,
allegories
keep
that
keep
even
talking. I gotta go to the bathroom real quick. Hold up.
yeah, even in the movie, not even in the year 1938 or 39 when they made The Wizard of Oz, they were using all these allegories to compare everything to the modern times for the day, and they figured out that this man behind the curtain is this person that makes the world go round, or group of people that makes the world go round. We don't know who they are, but let's discover who they are, and they for sure enough they find this dweeb, that's he's obviously in real life you probably wanted to hang the guy, but it's somewhat comical. You find out it's not this scary, menacing, big muscular guy with a machine gun. It's some dweeb behind the curtain, and it's a matter of now getting people to the point where we can expose these people and find out who they are and what their plan is. I kind of think we kind of already know at some level. I mean, we know the senators and the politicians are all on the I don't know. I'm gonna let you use the bathroom, and it's weird I'm talking and you're out. So, but like I said, the man behind the curtain is a dweeb. That's what it usually, or the women behind the curtain.
Oh, it's definitely not women behind the curtain. Let's not kid ourselves.
Well, I think the elites are men. They're just using women in positions. Women don't make the decisions. They might make the marital decisions and the financial decisions, but they're not really making the political decisions.
I just see more of like this low antagonism on the middle class, this continuing antagonism, attacks here, more promotion of black man, white girl on the television. I mean, every commercial is all about black dude, white girl. The occasional Asian woman with the white guy. It's so funny. Going back to the whole interracial thing, the only women that are interested in me, it's women of another race. It's either black or Oriental women. It's fucking crazy, man.
Well, that's because a lot of those Asians, believe it or not, still economically fare less than whites. That's a fact. They're not all living in Computerville, making millions. Most Asians are blue collar that work in their own restaurants. Okay, so that's not hard to believe. And then, of course, African American women, a lot of them are, I mean, you're not going to find a super attractive black woman that's going to hit on you. Maybe you will. I don't know.
I like them. They don't bother me.
Yeah. Oh, you like the big girls?
I like black women. Yeah, they're very sweet to me. They've always been very kind and
talking
good to me.
The ones that are 100 pounds overweight.
Well, maybe not like that.
Yeah.
But the other day I saw this old black guy, and he left a Christmas card to the people at Starbucks. It was all white people. I don't listen. That's the other thing that's not really fooling anybody anymore. This whole white guy against black guy thing. That's one thing I've noticed, is that black people and white people are not falling for that fucking bullshit. And I'm very proud to see that African Americans have woken up to that fucking shenanigans, man.
Well, they are, but they're not, because I think a lot of law-abiding black citizens are sitting on the sidelines saying, where's this going to go? I think what it is that maybe some people in the black community think they're looking at BLM and they're thinking, maybe we'll get a victory in this, it's which is a very sorely mistaken thing, because there's going to be no victory with BLM. I mean,
oh damn, they fooled us again, son. Shit. I don't. You know what it is? I think black people realize, oh no, we're not. It's like the mouse with the cheese. It's like oh hell no, we ain't go near that mousetrap again. We know what you're up to. And that's and that's the cool thing about the internet, is that so many people can
not enough. We haven't seen any BLM marches now because it's cold as hell in the Midwest and the stuff, and it's getting colder.
Yeah, but it wasn't, Steve. It wasn't black people in BLM. It was white girl. It was the thought.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, the social justice. I know what you're saying. It was all these white girls were barking and cops. I know what you're saying.
But the chimp out, when it came to the rioting and looting, that's a different story. But as far as protesting in the streets, it wasn't black people.
Right.
Sure, they're gonna get a free pair of Nikes, and they'll break into a fucking Gucci store and stuff. But that's about it. That's as far as they go. They got their fucking shit, and that was just a big insurance job on the grand scheme of things, because no one's buying Rolex watches. No one's buying fucking polo shirts. No one's buying these expensive consumerist goods right now. So a lot of these corporations can just write them off as losses and collect on the insurance money.
Yeah, which you wind up paying for too. That does get trickled down. So, yep.
Right, there's only so many Chinese people you can bring into the United States to buy this fucking garbage. Because that's who's into consumerism right now, is the decadent fucking Chinese middle class that's growing.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny. Part of me is really pissed off because the things we're talking about right now, there are now so many channels talking about it when in fact we've been talking about these things for so long. And
Like they act like they discovered this first.
right,
Like,
it's so fucking aggravating.
yeah, it's like a get rich quick scheme. You discover what a scam it is, and somebody says, oh, or they'll say, "Oh, did you just hear about this new thing called MGTOW?" It's like, dude, MGTOW is like on its way out. It doesn't really hasn't done anything, but some idiot's some 18-year-old kid who's horny and can't get any action in his life is gonna just adopt MGTOW now. So you've always got these Johnny come latelys that act like it's something new, you know.
Yeah, I've been listening to a lot of Dev on Stack lately, and he's really good. And he did a live stream. He spent like a half hour talking about MGTOW and how he kind of supported it and how he doesn't support it. It was pretty interesting. And I can't believe how many people hate MGTOW. I was talking to this guy called Endover, and I think he's from England. I really don't know. And he just shitted all over my face when I invited him to do a live stream. He's like, "Oh, fuck MGTOW, you guys are cucks and all this other bullshit." I'm like, "Okay, fucking white nationalist retard, what's the plan? What's the fucking plan? You tell me."
Well, men have been forced to go their own way. It's not men aren't rebelling against anything. The system's rebelling against men. Okay, it's you don't have a choice to be MGTOW. You have to be MGTOW. You're not
right. And what really offended me was that he just assumed that I was a fucking white person. He had no idea. Like he just started going off on it, saying you should be out there making white babies and all this other bullshit. I'm like, dude, first of all, I don't know what fucking fantasy world you live in, but you sound you sound equally deranged as the social justice warriors right now.
Yep, that happens. Well, hence the reason I said MGTOW's not united. There's nothing much united with it.
Right, it's more of a sovereign citizen type of movement. Okay, so my argument is, okay, well, what do you got? Oh, you got to form communities. Okay, well, I don't know. My neighbor's an asshole from Colorado. I have nothing in common with him. He drives a Subaru and fucking is a vegan. The guy's. I have nothing in common with this guy.
Yeah,
right?
move to the Italian community. They don't realize it's these Italian communities have been decimated. You know.
Yeah, because they're the last they're kind of like the last of the whites that have some type of identity. There's no doubt about it. And the Irish do too. I don't want to knock on the Irish. They certainly have their ways about them. And most certainly the Russians, because they're becoming a much more prominent in the middle class. But again, the Russians are they're totally foreign. Like I have nothing in common with them. So again, we kind of go back to this whole, we kind of go back to how America is kind of this economic zone where they're kind of eroding the heritage part of the United States. So it becomes this kind of this transient era where we're able to give middle class taxpayer dollars to the country of Egypt and Cambodia.
I don't know. I mean, it's so you're getting off that we're jumping around here. Incrementalism versus in your faceism. You say incrementalism, I say it's going to be in your faceism. I think things might start to go downhill fast.
Hey, did you change your mic setting?
No, I just kind of walked away from it. Go ahead. I'm trying to talk.
All right, no. What in your faceism with what? Again, I think that in your faceism it's the antagonism. It's more just antagonism. You'll have a protest here, another statue gets torn down over there, but again, the prevailing culture is more of the wokeness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think that they may just incrementally do things.
Yeah, and then like I bought a box of Twinkies yesterday. I ate one Twinkie, and I'm like, God damn it, that Twinkie was really fucking small. I got to eat another one to equal one Twinkie what it was 20 years ago.
Right. Yeah, they're making things smaller.
Making things much smaller. A box of cereal. Have you bought a box of cereal lately?
Not in a long time.
Dude, you get like 2 bowls out of a thing of Frosted Mini Wheats now.
Wow. Yeah, I remember we used to get 4 or 6 bowls out of it or more.
So the bigger question I have is, okay, what is one guy, a single guy, supposed to do? How are you supposed to safeguard yourself?
I have a couple of male relatives that are single, like cousins, and I can tell you, well, they're having the time of their life. They don't care. They get to go to the restaurants and spend money on themselves. When you have a woman in your life, you have to spend money to make them happy. You realize that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, that's because then they're not satisfied with the status quo. They're always looking for something bit newer and better.
You know what? There's nothing like going out for ribs and steak or getting maybe a fish dinner or something. And yeah, I leave 20% tip. I'm always going to leave a tip. I'm not that jaded. I love tipping waitresses, but outside of that, that's my only obligation. I don't have to take her to a fine restaurant. I mean, I would love to do that. If I had a nice woman in my life, I would go out of my way to make her happy. It's a conundrum, you know. It's a catch-22. When you get something nice, you want to make it happy, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, my fear is that if you're single and you're like 60, 65, right, and you don't have anything saved up, and this is the great fear I have, is the future, 30, 40 years down the line, is that most people my age will not have somewhat of a social safety net or a money safety net. They're just going to be in a state of perpetual debt. So if you don't have a family unit, what is going to happen to these people? My theory is that you may see the rise of what is it?
Please get back together. It's already happening now. I'm seeing it. I'm closer to my siblings now than I ever was because of the tightness. Now we're actually talking. It's actually working out pretty good.
You see, that's a good thing. That's great because the veneer, the facade that we've put up the past 20 years is finally subsiding.
One of my brothers, every time we get off the phone, he says, "I love you." He says, "I love you." And I was pissed at him for a while, but I'm not holding a grudge. That's not first of all, I'm a Christian, so I don't hold grudges. And I thought, that's great. He's saying this in tough times. This is what people need to say is, "I love you" to your brothers and sisters, because that's all you're going to have, and, you're going to have to hold on to the very people that might help you in the end. You can't survive. Individualism sucks. You cannot survive as like some cowboy maverick on the range. You have to have a group of people that you can cohabitate with. That's just the way it is, or at least work with in some degree.
Well, what I was saying, for the people that don't have these type of things, you may see the rise of the concept of euthanasia. I think they're going to make that legal, where you can kill yourself, and they'll give you like
I don't know how you enforce that law. I mean, if you succeeded at the first time, you can't prosecute you if you're dead. Only God can prosecute you, which I don't recommend. If you're a spiritual person, I really don't recommend suicide, because you are in fact committing murder, and I tend to think that it's something that you will take into the next world with you, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, I agree with you, and all major religions condone it.
Yeah, because it really hurts the people around you. It really does. You commit suicide. I had a relative, a cousin, that committed suicide, and I can tell you, it affects everything. Dozens of people are just...
It's a selfish act.
Yeah, well, they say it's a selfless act because you're only doing it to yourself, but it's a selfish act because you don't realize how many people you're hurting.
That's right. I read recently in Michigan, an 18-year-old killed themselves, and it was at the wake. They brought a Catholic priest in, and the Catholic priest basically didn't sugarcoat anything. The priest was like, he killed himself. That is a sin, and we should pray for him that he's now basically rotting in hell. And there was a huge outcry. How dare he say something like that about my beloved Timmy, who killed himself because he was bullied in school? But if you go back to Catholic doctrine, you're not supposed to do that. That's one of the sins to cry to heaven.
And that's where if you get put in a FEMA camp, you just let them kill you. Just let them cut your head off. Don't try to kill yourself, because I mean, I don't know what God. If you ask God to come in your heart and you really are strong in your spiritual beliefs, I think that you will find. I mean, what's going to happen? We're dealing with an evil force. I mean, this is demonic. What we're dealing with in the world, these people like Kissinger, these are not people that fear anything. They've made a pact with the devil years ago.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know how it's demonic? It's the promoting of trannies.
Why is it that all these elites go to these things like they go to the joint Skull and Bones, they go to the Bohemian Grove, they go to these weird mock festivals, they're engaged in 33-degree masonry. It's cryptically evil. I mean, there's nothing like kind. Every time I think of someone going to a Masonic lodge, there's low-level Freemasons are probably harmless, but when I think of people like George Bush Sr., I think of people that are just demonically possessed by this making a pact with the devil kind of thing, you know?
Well, I guess in order to get to the club, you have to sign some paperwork that says you're signing your soul over to the.
I have never heard George Bush Sr. ever proclaim the name of Jesus Christ. He has never said that Jesus Christ is the Savior. He has never said that. And Billy Graham, I know Billy Graham was a Christian. He had a hard time dealing with this because he said it many times that he tried to talk to diplomats and celebrities about, you got to get right with God, and they would just laugh at him. And he kind of would laugh it off and say, well, we had a good time anyway. But he made it clear, Billy Graham, that these elites that he would deal with, he would be invited to like George Burns' party. George Burns said to him one time, I am God. I don't need God. And he kind of shrugged it off. But Billy Graham was put off because he knew that these celebrities and these politicians, they have made a pact with something more evil. I mean, it is really disgusting. They are. We can't relate to that because we don't have that nature. But there are a lot of people that if you get into that position of power, you might do that,
I always bring up Bono of U2.
Yeah, him up because tell everybody about Bono, what Bono did.
The guy used to dress up as the devil on stage, and a few years ago he dressed up as the devil on stage in Europe, right? And a lot of his music, a lot of these neo-Christians say how right with God the band U2 is, when in fact it's a fallacy. They were promoting some serious demonic shit in their music, and a lot of people don't realize that. And a lot of it's in the album Achtung Baby, which is probably their most successful album, where again the song "The Fly," Bono was portraying himself as Beelzebub, which was one of the minions in demonology. Again, he dressed as a devil, and a lot of their lyrics are about Old Testament shit. So,
well, also I was over at a friend's house or an acquaintance of mine, and not too far from where I live, and he was drinking, and we're having a few shots, and we just were partying a little bit, and I just had beer at the time, but he's like getting into this, like these videos on YouTube, these demonic women with blood on them, and they're shaking, and their boyfriend, their man in there is like dressed as a devil with gold teeth. I mean, this is sick. This stuff in the 60s would have never flied. I mean, it was as narcissistic as the 60s was. What you're seeing today, and it is just off the charts sick. I mean, it is like debauchery to the nth degree.
Yeah, what was it that bothered you so much about that?
Because the videos were basically, they were using sex to stimulate you, but they were taking like these anorexic women and they were dancing around with blood all over them, and they were biting, and it was like really toxic. Everything seemed like there was no real intimacy. There was no real puppy love intimacy like a 1970s love song. It was just all demonic.
Yeah, it's just raw. It's all raw. There's no love to it. It's basically sex is mechanical, and you're trying to get off using the individual as like as a sex toy, using the man as a fucking walking dildo that spews diamonds, and she's just your plaything. I totally get where you're coming from, and that's a lot of the music today.
And what bothered me about it was he was like, "Oh, isn't this awesome, dude? Isn't it just like, dude, awesome?" I says, "Awesome." I says, "Are you understanding you're being manipulated with sex, which you're never going to get these girls?" "Oh, I know. I realize that these are just entertainers." I says, "But this is taking entertainment to a level of depravity that I've never seen in my growing up in the 80s. This guy's a lot younger than me, so he didn't know."
Yeah. Well, you look at Hollywood, where it's these extreme forms of survival movies, Hunger Games. You can lump the movie Alive into it, which is actually a true story. Zombieland, Walking Dead, Land of the Dead. It's basically people don't dream over, and on top of it, people aren't dreaming of overcoming basic difficulties because they are basic. Let's say the flu, or your ox died on the Oregon Trail. War is nothing but a duel, is like a duel on a larger scale. So What movies are doing is pretty much programming you to be a LARPer, where you always make fun of the hillbilly. I got my guns. I got my pickup truck.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
No, I'm amazed that these people in Hollywood have studied these people for 70 years. They seem to love making fun of these people. And I agree that some of these hillbillies really are just like what they portray them as, but they seem to have spent a lot of time like, why don't they study Italians and Greeks and Polish Americans? Why is it Anglo hillbillies that they're so obsessed with?
Right. Because they hate them. That's why.
They hate them. Oh, they hate them. And then the funny thing was, I was laughing how Fox News and all the networks associate, or the umbrella company owned by Rupert Murdoch, they always make fun of hillbillies. But when it came to the war effort, all of a sudden these people became their friends. These are good Americans, you know. That's what I thought was kind of hypocritical and comical.
Well, going back to what I was saying earlier about Hollywood is portraying like war movies, and again these apocalyptic like movies. I Legend. You don't realize that's just a movie. Like, do you understand? Like, what are you supposed to do for food? What are you supposed to do for nutrients and things like this? So people think that, okay, I got my gun, I got 1,000 rounds from my AR-15, but that's not enough for you to survive.
Yeah, the warriors are always well fed. Like they seem to magically maintain a normal body weight, but you never see them really eating much. It's just like they just magically have the nutrients to survive like this, you know?
Right, when in fact that's the most important part, is not so much shooting and survive, and not so much shooting enemies. It's about self-sustaining yourself on sustenance is more important.
Yeah, that's a spiritual thing. If you can sustain yourself with a gun and have to kill an animal or grow food, that is as spiritual as you can get. And that's one element that they eliminate from these apocalyptic movies, that somehow people magically seem to be well fed, and they're riding around on these bikes they're able to find gas somewhere. I mean, they seem to magically, like Mad Max, they find gasoline everywhere. There's just plenty of gasoline to go around to drive these motorbikes and shit. It's just crazy.
Yeah. Yep, 100%. Right, where are you getting gasoline from, right? Going back to the whole survival thing, I was reading the testimonies of survivors from the MS Estonia. MS Estonia was a cruise ship, a car ferry that sunk in the Baltic in 1994, and 850 people died, or some shit like that, 870. And the overriding majority of survivors were young single males. Most of the women, children, and elderly died. And they were interviewing the survivors on asking them, like, what exactly happened? How did everyone else die? What kept you alive? What kept you going as the ship was going down? And they thought about their families. They thought about God. They thought about things they love, and that kept them moving to get them off the ship as it was sinking. And there were other people trying to escape the ship, but they gave up. They gave into the despair. They were like, it's over. And they didn't think about all the things that they cherished in their lives. And that said a lot to me, and it spoke eons when I was reading their testimonies, that, man, you got to keep pushing. You got to keep soldiering on. And things are not that bad. We can talk about all these black pill concepts on our live streams, but at the end of the day, you're still eating every day. You still have electricity. You still have running water. Granted, there's this demonic force that's, basically the elephant in the room. If you turn on the television today, it's basically telling you to go fucking kill yourself and the world is shit. But hey, look, you still have a lot of other things that, make you happy in life,
I don't believe that people should adopt a hedonistic view of the world. If you're living TFL or incel, that's not an excuse to want to off yourself. I think that the problem with the incel community is that it focuses too much on what you don't have versus what you have.
Yes, correct.
And I agree with that. It really does. It doesn't build friendships. You're not going to have long-lasting friends. If you work in a co-op and you guys maybe plant strawberries, or you grow you build friendships through doing things. You don't build friendships through these stupid political movements or these ideologies. It's like, I don't know. This is, I think, one of the reasons why a lot of these internet-based communities seem to never really get anywhere, because they're never physically interacting and meeting people, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree with you on that one.
Yeah. So let me tell you something. I'm not going to ask you your personal stuff. I'm going to just tell you to make amends with family members. I know it's not easy all the time because maybe you were treated a certain way. If you're living with your mom, make the best of it and actually take care of each other, because you're going to need each other in hard times.
Right, man. If your parents are elderly and your grandparents are still alive, you're gonna have to start looking out for a lot of these people. And the other thing is that you have to, whoever's like dead weight around you, you're gonna have to tell them to start acting straight. So if you have a cousin or a brother who just sits around and plays video games all day and smokes pot, you're gonna have to talk some sense into them. A lot of people are really brain dead on what's actually what's happening on the global scale and the macro.
Mm-hmm. I'm not saying you can't meet people in bars. I do have a few relatives that are regularly into the bar scene. They have a lot of a lot of good time Charlies. A lot of them are good Christians, but you have to, at some point, you're going to have to pull away and say, look, I have to associate with myself with people that ultimately in hard times we're going to help each other, not just cry over spilled milk and shit and talk about our shitty lives, you know? And I think that's what MGTOW is kind of reverted to, is just a bunch of people crying over something it's not controllable. I agree. Sex relations are bad, but you can still interact with people if you make a choice.
Well, I think when it comes to MGTOW, it's also under the guise of what it was, let's say, a few years ago. So if you're a single guy and a sovereign citizen and a confirmed bachelor, I mean that's great if things stay the course, but at the same time you're gonna have to keep in the back of your mind that things can get much worse, which is what we're discussing tonight. Now, personally, again, I go back to the incrementalism that we've accelerated the incrementalism the past year, and the next 10 years might be much more chaotic, but you're going to have to put it into perspective that, hey, look, you can't be an asshole to everyone around you. You can't be egotistical about certain things. You have to sometimes
let me tell you, my life has played out like this. My two brothers I've talked to, they've confirmed this to me, that people are very flighty. You have neighbors you don't talk to, and you try to make conversation. They go into mood swings. I don't understand. I sometimes think that people psychologically are not introspection is such a wonderful thing, the ability to see what's going on in your own head. And I don't think most people have that ability to think what's going on in their own freaking head. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When somebody becomes a nihilist, they don't become a nihilist necessarily because they're just narcissistic. That's part of it. They become a nihilist to the world because they don't know how to deal with their own thoughts. They can't see their own life and say, look, you know what? I'm not a perfect person. I need to change. I need to do things. I've made mistakes, but I need to get my life right. And I think this is where religion comes in, is that the Bible teaches you that from day one, we were sinners. We were always a screwed up species from day one. And we can't do it without God. We can't do it without introspection. We have to look at ourselves and say, what can I do to make the situation better too? It's nihilistic people. I don't think they want to be nihilistic, but I don't think they have they're unwilling to get introspective, look at their own lives.
Well, it's part of the 5 stages of acceptance, and they're on a different level. Same thing with those incel guys,
Yeah.
Everything is shit, life is shit, like, okay, dude, there's more to life than bitching and moaning about you not getting your dick sucked.
An example is like if somebody in the MGTOW community finds a woman in their life, they get all angry about it. Well, why don't you just look back at what you're doing? You're basically saying that you don't want to see anybody else happy, because there's nothing worse than seeing a person live incel or TFL, whatever. I want to see people happy. I want to see guys find a good woman and say, hey, after many years of not having a woman, I found the right woman. I want to see that happen. But a lot of these guys don't want to see this happen. They want to see you suffer.
Well, we talked about how your neighbors want to see you fucking down and out and foreclosed on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. I mean, not literally. I haven't had any neighbors, but I know what you're in the general sense. You're right. Where they actually get off on seeing somebody in hard times because it boosts their ego up, and I don't think that that's the approach to take. I think that the approach to take is that you don't want to see people suffer. When I run into restaurant owners, you know what I say to them? How's business doing? Oh, it's not doing bad. It's picking up. I'm so happy to hear that. I don't want to hear a restaurant owner say to me, if this keeps up anymore, we won't be able to stay in business because I'm rooting for their success. I don't like to see people suffer. I like to see people succeed. Even if I'm not succeeding, I still want to see people succeed.
Yeah, I totally agree. And
Yeah.
the thing is also is that I've noticed that as I've basically when this whole basically white people bad Trump took office, you obviously identify as a Ukrainian of descent, and I identify as Italian descent. Me second generation, you I guess first or second. But
Yeah.
what that does is that you're now identifying with something other than being American because there's this undertone that white people bad, right?
Yeah. Well, you have to. You know what they tried. See, here's what happened in Boston back in the early mid '90s. A lot of Irish people in Boston. There were still some remnants of those neighborhoods. They were putting up like shamrocks and like like little Irish shamrocks, and they said this is just a covert form of white racism. And I can understand why, because if you're treated like crap for being white, then the next best thing you can do is identify with your ethnic group. Well,
Yeah.
that's not tolerable either, according to the liberals and the Marxists.
Well, Massachusetts is the racist state in America. Make no fucking mistake about it. It's
Yeah.
not Alabama. It's not Texas. It's not Oklahoma. It's Massachusetts. And you can see it with the New England Patriots. And you can see the people who actually reside in Massachusetts. And for the most part, it is the oldest state in the United States, right?
Yeah,
So,
but the city of Boston has succumbed to fucking multiculturalism and liberalism. The city of Quincy, Massachusetts, which is a suburb, it's on the main train line there. It's all Asians now. It's no longer a white town anymore. It's Massachusetts. It's old Irish remnants are kind of things of the past.
yeah, I don't know about that. I've never been to Boston, so I actually have no desire to see Boston.
I ran Boston Marathon 3 times, and I remember I stayed my first one in 2009. I stayed in at Quincy, Massachusetts. I think it was I don't forget what hotel it was, a Best Western, I think, and it was a nice place. But I noticed like the Asian population was big there, and again, I'm not knocking other ethnic groups, but there is no there is no Irish or white solidarity anymore. These cities, even though you see Massachusetts is a racist state, I find it hard to believe because Boston is definitely decreased in it takes to live there. It's expensive, but it's not it's not that romantic Irish blue collar community like of the 1930s. They made all these movies, these Irish boxers. That's a blast of the past.
Okay, I see where see where you're going with
I,
this.
I, there's a lot of Irish people. I know people always say there's a lot of Jews in Hollywood. There's a lot of Irish people in Hollywood too over the years. I mean, almost like half the directors or third of them were Irish. And a lot of them tried to romanticize that poor Irish culture because it was very embedded within the Catholic Church. But those romantic Irish Catholic neighborhoods are kind of like they're gone now. They're not really, they don't exist anymore. I mean, it's kind of sad. I'm not Irish, but I still like the fact that they identify as Irish.
Yeah, well, I don't know what else they fucking identify as.
They
It's like,
they identify with Catholicism too, because a lot of Irish immigrants were your northern ones were Irish Catholics, and I kind of like that. Even though I wouldn't marry I might marry an Irish woman, but I would love to marry a Ukrainian woman because it's just my ethnic background. But at the same time, I like diversity. I think that's kind of cool to have Italian neighborhoods. I don't want to marry an Italian woman, but I love the Italian food, and you guys make some great stuff.
yeah,
And it's
I think that's important. Again, is like having your own little septic little enclave, but that's not what they want. And it's and Tom makes a point. The reason why we're viewing it through this prism is because it's happening to us in the United States, but in fact this is a global problem. So for example, part of the pork barrel spending was, I think, millions of dollars that are going to gender studies in Pakistan. Well, why are you doing that? Well, you're trying to break the Pakistani people. This is a global situation. This is a global problem. When you have Black Lives Matter protests in New Zealand and shrines to Saint Floyd in Syria, well, we can see that this is a global situation. This is global power. This is soft power, the silk glove, the back end, where you don't actually need to have a combating force to initiate and impose your doctrine. You can just do it through the guise of NGOs, foundations, the World Economic Forum, and the UN, and obviously like the IMF and things, and the World Bank.
You know, one of the reasons I think that the Hollywood crowd is so against the Anglo hillbillies, they don't intermarry. You don't see too many half Italian, half rednecks. They only marry within their own culture. And I think that that in their own mind is intolerable. They can't deal with a white group of people that are only interested in marrying their own kind. It's almost like we got to put a wedge in this right now. And they're the only group, the redneck hillbillies, whether they live in West Virginia or Kentucky or South Carolina, they tend to stick with their own ethnic group. And that is intolerable. We have got to destroy that, you know?
Yeah, yeah. There's no doubt about it. And again, it's not just them. I really go back that this is seriously a global problem in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in subcontinent Asia. It's a global phenomenon. And what we've realized during COVID is that there is in fact a type of new world order that is kind of showing its hand, and basically that the mask is falling off. Like, we're here. There's nothing you can do about it. Biden certainly represents that factor. There's no doubt about it. He is
I
a
had to
globalist.
laugh when Roosh is of Iranian descent. Roosh V would go to Ukraine.
Armenian.
Oh, Roosh V would travel to Eastern Europe and he would wonder, why don't the girls like me here? Well, come on, you look like you're from the Middle East, and these people don't intermarry. This is Eastern Europe is messed up as it is economically. They don't intermarry. A Ukrainian woman is not going to marry some Black American just because he's got money. They tend to still maintain their stronghold with their ethnic group, and I think that, and I'm not by any means praising Putin because the guy is he's not a good guy, but Russia and a lot of Eastern European countries have maintained their ethnicity, and that has kept them stronger, I think, in some ways.
Well, the only reason why they're able to keep that is because they've had an external threat and they know what hardships are. Going back to Belarus with the Nazi invasion, okay, that's 70 years ago. So that still is an undertone in their culture. You see what I'm saying? They're pressed up against Russia. They're pressed up against Germanic forces. So for them, it's very important to protect themselves. Same thing goes for Hungary. Same thing goes for Romania. Same thing goes for Vietnam and Cambodia. You see what I'm saying? So these countries know what an external threat is, so they're able to be somewhat more tribal and keep the foreigner out, be somewhat xenophobic towards these things. You know, when I was
And
on
they,
I was on the
and they do it on autopilot. They don't even have to think about it. They just kind of instinctively know it's not right to do, which I kind of think is cool. They do it. They don't do it through propaganda. They just kind of through their own autopilot. They just realize there's an external threat. We need to stick together.
right, and there's no questioning why.
Mm-hmm.
They don't quit. Well, why do we do that? That's more of a Western dude issue.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, being Italian, the town I grew up in was predominantly white. It was half Irish and half Italian, and we were pressed up against a Hispanic and black neighborhood, and we just kept it that way. We didn't really give a shit if it was never really up to debate. You see what I'm saying? Like, yeah, no, there's no conversation about letting fucking black people in our town. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Our town's nice. Their town's a shithole. They stay over there. Period. I don't give a
And,
fuck.
and I tend to think that intermarriage between different races, I call it sexual narcissism. That's kind of my term. it's where you're willing to compromise. Well, I don't want to date guys of my own race or marry a guy or a woman. And in the process, you want to keep those cultures. But I don't know if we can really do that in America anymore. I think the rednecks are the only people that have maintained some sort of ethnic purity, so to speak.
Well, excuse me, but black people have too. So give it up for black people.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Somalian immigrants, they're not going to intermarry. They're going to keep but they're not Christians. And
No,
I read some
full blown. I have zero contempt. Like that shit, I'm not down with letting people from Africa in. We have enough problems with regular black people. We need to let people from Africa in on top of it. That's just going to exasperate.
It said that African Americans actually are more American than any even Eastern Europeans.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and I think that we have more in common with them in the sense that we kind of see the struggles that they've had. But
well, I got a good story. So I'm on the New York City subway, and I'm next to two black people, right?
Right.
And one black person spits on the subway floor on the subway car, right? And I look at the black person next to me, and she starts yelling at the other black person about what that person just did. Like, man, what the fuck is wrong with you? And that black person was from Africa. And then the two of us look at each other and start fucking laughing like what the hell is this person doing here?
Yeah.
It's like, damn, man, like, yo, that's not cool. Like, you see what I'm saying? And, it was just funny. We had a moment being an American. We had a moment like, yo, this person is from Africa spitting on the fucking car floor that everyone's going to walk on.
Yeah.
So, going back to the little tribalism thing, and I'm going to take some quotes from the book now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to read. We're going to move on to the next stage here. The strategy was essentially twofold. First, to break the power of the working class, especially the military potential of the working class whites. And secondly, to fortify the domination of the international establishment that their grip could never be loosened. The foundational phase of Civil War II was characterized by, number one, tribalization, or the undermining of the concept of citizenship and its gradual replacement with an imperial tiering system in order to divide the working class along tribal lines. That's most certainly taking place. Number two, the creeping loss of democracy by shifting real power away from elected officials and to non-elected judges, other appointed officials, private and governmental institutions, and international bodies. Three, gradual falling wages starting about 1972 and the increased wealth for the property-owning class. 4. The slow decay of physical infrastructure of cities, their abandonment by whites, and their replacement by minorities wedded to the establishment by welfare and affirmative action. 5. Growing legal and illegal immigration to transfer America into a typical third world nation with a poverty-stricken, apathetic peasantry and to reduce the white percentage of the population.
Right.
6. The first appearance of racial association in police and the militarization of the police. Give me a second. I'm smoking a cigarette.
Okay.
7. The creation of a vast international infrastructure of treaties and bureaucrats, many with diplomatic immunity as part of the imperial tiering system of the New World Order. 8. A massive publicly drive to call for gun control in the name of law and order, but whose real purpose was to directly cripple the military potential of the working class, especially the working class and middle class whites. 9. The appearance of massive street gangs. While these gangs were not a component of the imperial conversion, they are a manifestation of its increasingly successful implementation, and the establishment is now faced with the task of co-opting them or crushing them. 10. The co-option of the mass media, especially the electronic media, to de-emphasize some events and highlighting others. all in relation to their impact on imperial conversions.
Yeah, like what? Just today, I get this pop up from Yahoo News saying black man is brutally beaten by white cop for.
I lost you. Come back. Well, that's from the book. You guys can download the PDF, Civil War II by Thomas Chittums. Steve, I lost you. Give you a couple more minutes. Mexican citizen versus American Protestant. One society believes that the fate is set at birth. The other believes man earns his condition while on earth. Who do you think will win this battle? Good question. Who would win that battle? The Ronquista checklist. Watch for the developments that constitute a checklist of events that will unfold as they wedge closer to the abyss of Civil War II in the Southwest. This is a good list here. Let's see if Steve comes back.
All right, got it.
All right, go ahead. Start reading. I'm gonna go to the bathroom real quick.
All right. Well, I need to see it in front of me. Hold on. Number 9, the appearance of massive street gangs. While these gangs were not a component of Imperial conversion, they are a manifestation of its increasingly successful implementation, and the establishment is now faced with the task of co-opting them or crushing them. Number 10, the co-option of the mass media, especially electronic media, to de-emphasize some events and highlight others, all in relation to their impact on Imperial conversion. And I'm going to get into that. I just got a pop-up from Google or from Yahoo that was emphasizing that today about a black man that was abused by a white cop. And I know what you're saying. They're purposely handpicking these stories.
Oh, of course. We let media. I mean, it goes without saying, obviously.
It's always this. It's like we don't know that there's 10 white guys being beaten ruthlessly by a cop at the same time in tandem. But it's that one story that needs to make the media, which is disgusting.
So why don't you read this, the Ronquista checklist. I don't know why I can't say that word.
Well, I read. You want to read all 10 of them or what?
Yeah, let's go one by one.
All right, we'll start with number 1, tribalism. Tribalization, or the undermining of the concept of citizenship and its gradual replacement with an imperial tiering system in order to divide the working class along tribal lines. You still hear me?
Yep.
So what do you want to? So that would be, in other words, getting rid of your ethnicity and creating some sort of like hierarchy where that doesn't matter.
Hang on, wait. I sent you the wrong list. Give me a minute.
Is that the one you just read?
Yeah, it was. That's why I'm highlighted the wrong one. Un momento, por favor. Here you go. Okay.
All right, let me read this next one. Number 10 or number 9, we want me to read.
Start with number 1. Scroll up. Watch for the following developments that constitute a checklist of events that will unfold as we edge closer to the abyss of Civil War II in the Southwest.
Okay, number 1 says a requirement by any local or state government that its employees must be fluent in Spanish. That knocks out most white people, that's for sure. Most white people never learn Spanish.
Yep. And that's certainly happening.
Lack of Number 2, a lack of requirement by any local or state government that its employees must be fluent in English. Number 3, the adoption of policies by school boards that Spanish classes be mandatory or that instruction in English be optional. The reason why they mandate Spanish is they know white people never learn it, so it's almost forcing Spanish-speaking people to be the overlords.
Right, and you can't communicate with them, which makes it difficult.
Yeah, even the elites don't even speak Spanish. That's what's even funny. Let's see, number 4 says the demand by a Mexican political party or a major politician that the Southwest of the United States be returned to Mexican sovereignty. Item number 5, the formation of a Hispanic-based political party in America. Number 6, the increasing display by many Mexican Americans of nationalistic symbols such as the Mexican flag in much the same manner as the African Americans now commonly wear Malcolm X hats. Number 7, the emergence of a revolutionary guerrilla movement in Mexico. Number 8, the overthrow of the Mexican establishment either by an election, coup d'etat, or revolution that brings an ultra-nationalistic government to power, either right or left wing. Number 9, why is it so centered on Spanish-speaking people?
Because he's focusing on the Southwest region, which is predominantly Hispanic.
Okay, now the number 9 says a general economic collapse in Mexico followed by a massive surge of illegal aliens into America. Number 10, the expansion of the Border Patrol or its conversion into a military force equipped with heavy weapons. Number 11, the massing of American military units near the border or the involvement of our federal military in order to control, in border control. Indians by genocide. The Spanish immigrants redefined themselves as Mexicans, revolted and stole the entire country from the Spanish crown. C, the angels stole the land from the Mexicans by wars of secession and aggression. D, the Mexicans and Mexican Americans will steal the land back either by direct or force or civil war or under a color of law backed by the police force of the state. Boy, there's so much stuff here. This is a long list. God, I'm gonna have to go through this whole thing. Number 19 or 20, or let's see, 19.
I left some of the items out that weren't really that really didn't fit the narrative.
Okay, so you're saying basically the Southwest of America is implementing these pro-Mexican laws.
Yeah, well, it's being reconquered by Mexicans through immigration.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny though that the Hispanics were completely left out during this last presidential election. You see that neither side mentioned Hispanics. Did you notice that?
It's hypocrisy to the nth degree.
Yeah.
Biden is more of a white supremacist than I think even Trump is. Biden has never really integrated himself with people of color.
Yeah. You know, and if we look at the South, the hillbillies that you always discuss about, the South has been an occupied country since this first Civil War, or at least psychologically occupied, and the threat of federal intervention was the only thing that kept the South from all-out tribal warfare in the 60s. Should the threat of federal intervention fade for any reason, genocidal warfare could erupt in the South. The whites and blacks in the South exist in a state similar to the Tutsis and Hutus in Rwanda. They are intermingled, they are in economic, political, and psychological competition, and they have no mutual history except that the mutual loathing and hatred of one another.
Right. Well,
so
I find it hard. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that if we saw over the summer what happened like at that Wendy's that you always talk about, and during the whole St. Floyd riots, that in Atlanta, they hijacked a tank and they broke into a CNN headquarters in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And if we were going down the path of Civil War II, the blacks would probably make Atlanta their capital.
Mm-hmm. CHOP was a joke. CHOP, they couldn't even maintain CHOP at all.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was all fucking, like, that was just fairy tale bullshit. Here, I'm going to send you another part here. This is about the blacks reconquering lands. You can read that one. It's shorter.
CHOP was a joke because they couldn't feed themselves. They couldn't clean up their sewage. It wound up being black on black violence in the end.
All right, go ahead. Read this part. So now we covered the Southwest. Then we're going to focus on the Southeast where there were African Americans dominate.
Okay. Let me read it. All right, I'll try to read this the best I can. Okay, the summation. The course of events in the South will likely follow the scenario. The blacks will seize political power legally, at least in the deep South. Whites will flee to enclaves within the South, and many will abandon the South altogether. Number 3, the corrupt black establishment will utterly empower the areas under its control, possibly leading to a takeover by revolutionary black extremists. Number 4, fighting will erupt between the blacks and the militias of the remaining white enclaves, in which most of the whites will be killed off unless rescued by the federal government. Number 5, the final result will be an independent black nation in the Deep South, with Atlanta its probable capital. But the problem with this is that the people that are producers are not going to. Why would black people want independence in this country, or why would any group other than white people want independence? They're not as capable of maintaining a society the same way. Am I right?
Well, again, it's we was kings. We was kings. So if let them think that they're fucking greater and better and what have you, and let them have their own fucking their little separate enclave and state, I guess, or separate country.
I don't agree with the author because he's making an assumption that that's what's going to happen, but most black people don't want to be separated. I mean, let's be honest about it. You need infrastructure to survive. You can't just abandon an infrastructure that has worked for decades and just say, well, we want independence. If that was a case, white people would be dancing. I think that the more likely scenario is that they're going to force integration at any level they can. Hence the reason why they bring Somalians in.
Right. Well, that's to further destabilize the country. When you keep mixing people, it just it becomes more chaotic and unstable. Because once the majority loses its majority, the more likely of a Brazilification of the country is more at hand than most people realize. I mean, look at any urban city that has black people in it as the majority. They're all shitholes. Cleveland, Baltimore, right? Camden. You see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
So I always say America will resemble Brazil. Whites with the power and money will seal themselves off from the Tower of Babel. Outside of the tower, gangs will form. White gangs will form within 50 to 100 years. When your society rejects you, you look to legit the manosphere as an outside of a podcast. So you start seeing like mafias and stuff form.
Well, let me ask you a question. How will women fare into this? We always think of insurrections as being men. How will the women, the former thought culture, amalgamate themselves into this thing?
That depends on how wealthy the country stays. So if they can still have avocado toast in fucking downtown Manhattan,
no. I'm talking about. We obviously know that revolution is not. You're not living in luxury when you're in revolution. So do you see women that these former social justice warriors taking off the banner and pretending to be conservatives?
Well, no, they're the useful idiots. So once their usefulness has been depleted, they'll wind up going into the countryside and have dogs lick peanut butter off their pussies.
Oh, I don't agree with it. I think that they'll change hats and pretend like they were conservatives all along.
Perhaps. I just don't see that happening at the moment, right? I don't see that.
Not at the moment. I'm talking if people are starving for food and your next meal isn't coming the next day. Licking peanut butter off your pussy is the furthest thing from their mind.
Well, they can eat that dog.
Come on, you're getting ridiculous now.
No, I know. What will happen to women? They may realign themselves and start identifying with the white men, but you know, right now their altruism is run amok. So you know, I think it was TFM or Sandman was discussing. Well, if they don't have children, they have to have an outlet for their empathy. So it's on minorities.
Right.
Like, why would white girl care so much about poor people in Africa when there's poor people living in their own town? You see what I'm saying? Telescopic philanthropy is what it's called.
I can tell you right now, most of these hillbilly chicks, they don't give a damn about. These hillbillies have a better sense of camaraderie than most people. I've never met a redneck hillbilly chick that is caught up into social justice warriors. I've never met one. They're all embedded to their men, whether they like them or not. So I think that there are some ethnic groups that will. I don't agree that every woman is going to be. So you act like every woman and her mother is letting a dog lick peanut butter off them. You're making a generalization that is so off the charts, ridiculous. You know.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting a little bit tired. Hang on, let me.
I mean, come on. Do you know how sick that is? I mean, you say, "Oh, women are all doing that." Well, how? Give me a percentage. Is it 50%, 80%? Give me
12%.
the percentage. What?
12%.
Okay, so 12% of women are doing that. So it leaves 88% of women that have different values. I tend to think women will do what is convenient for them, which is to side with who's ever in a strong position.
Yeah, I agree with you. Whoever's on top is where they'll go.
So I don't necessarily. I think a civil war is going to still take cooperation amongst the sexes at some level. You can't have a future without women because women are the only ones that can make babies.
I agree.
I mean, if you can tell me a man, you know, I mean, it's the MGTOW utopia is a bunch of nonsense. It's not sustainable. You know.
Why don't you read what I just sent you now?
All right. Why do I have to read it? Why don't you read it?
Because you got a better voice, and I'm getting tired. That's why.
All right, I'll read it.
Terror phase.
Terror phase: the abandonment of these of some areas of our cities by the police to gangs and other armed non-governmental groups. White police will be purged from urban forces, and the first firefights will occur between police and different ethnic groups. Gangs beginning to assume political goals and become a serious threat to the police in numbers and small arms. Politicians will begin to bid for their military backing. Gangs will begin to take on the characteristics of armies by wearing uniforms, assuming military ranks, standardizing weapons, and even acquiring military-style medium and heavy weapons. I think this is fantasy. They'll never do that. You have to be very intelligent and organized to do that. Gangs will begin to infiltrate military, police, and government. The use of armored vehicles and helicopters in how many gangs are going to be able to fly helicopters? And anti-gang assaults will no longer be rare, and first use of heavy weapons against gangs will occur in this phase. Number 14, the first cracks appearing in the loyalty of the white working class to the establishment as Imperial conversion and third world conversion become too obvious to deny. Number 15, this guy acts like he knows everything. I don't agree with everything this guy is saying. The first armored vehicles being destroyed by the resistance or gangs. The child will be photographed scrounging for food in a garbage dump in American soil. I mean, there's some truth to this, but I think that this guy's overly optimistic.
Ethnic militias will spontaneously form all across America. Ethnic cleansing will erupt and isolate.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me read. Ethnic cleansing will erupt and isolated pockets of this, and that ethnic groups will be butchered and bulldozed into mass graves. Cities will be taken under siege, and heavy artillery will be used in their unrestricted shelling. Checkpoints manned by militiamen will appear on all major roads. The economy will go into a crash and burn tailspin. Food will become increasingly scarce at any price, and the Americans will fight over garbage they would previously have hesitated to throw to their dog. The militias and gangs will now vastly outnumber the police and military.
Yeah, militia for sure, but I mean, I guess you're saying that this would be, well, I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, but I guess it's the inevitable, right?
Right. Now these are the various phases. So this is the terror phase. So we were kind of already in phase one, whether you like it or not, where you
Yeah.
see this animosity growing towards the basically the lower middle class, predominantly white lower middle class. These are the people that the elites have been trying to cull through abortion, through feminism, through the outsourcing of jobs, through the destruction of the unions. Obviously NAFTA played a huge factor into that. And now we're basically now the antagonistic phase is where we're seeing a lot of these things come forth, and that will exacerbate under the Biden administration, where he's basically picking people other than whites to take up political power.
You realize that this would never work, because the only way that the country could succumb to tyranny would be as if white soldiers attack white people. I don't see it being a situation where gangs could take over whites. I think whites, ingenuity-wise, would be able to overpower them.
Well, that's if you still hold the majority. But if you fast forward 50 years from now, that won't be the case. Now,
Yeah.
would it?
Oh yeah, yeah. 50 years from now, I think it's over. If some proactive thing doesn't happen quick, yes. If whites are 20%, it's all over. It's all over.
Yep. So the first major sign of a breakdown is no one listens to authority. Now, the mafia thrived in huge slums of Italian immigrants, but the Italians assimilated and moved into the suburbs, and the mafia has eroded in proportion. Naturally, the Italian mafia hasn't really been all that powerful in like 25 years. And that actually has a lot to do with Rudy Giuliani, whether Italians want to accept that or not, with the RICO laws in the late 80s and early 90s. The huge black and Hispanic slums are not shrinking, they're expanding, and the gangs are growing in proportion. These minority ghettos are permanent and expanding fixtures of our society, and their expansion beyond a certain indefinable extent means inevitable civil war. When considering gangs, it is necessary to note that many of their activities are political in nature. Black Lives Matter, for example. Money from protection rackets are a form of taxation, and the protection provided from rival gangs is a form of police protection. Labor union takeovers by gangs are a form of organizing society. That these activities are illegal does not invalidate the fact these gangs are establishing economic, social, legal, and even military structures that parallel the legal structures that connect the ghettos to the rest of American society, and that these legal structures are displacing their legal counterparts. Soviet Union collapsed, and anything that the government had to say was not legitimate. You saw the Chechen war break out, and that was a good example of how the government lost all credibility during the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 90s. So basically, with these COVID mandates, they're incoherent, they're alien orders, and no one wants to listen to them. Right now, the normie con, the middle class white dude, the conservative, still thinks he has legitimate power. Now, after having the election stolen from him, he's going to have to re-gear and retool his focus and realize that the government is illegitimate.
Yeah, that's going to be hard to do. I don't think that's going to happen overnight.
Well, I don't know, man. I mean, this past fucking 6 months have been pretty fucking been quite telling. I mean, I personally can't take the government. I'm just telling you, I can't take the. Yeah, go on.
Until the average white person loses their Harley Davidson motorcycle, these idiots with their beards, these rednecks, and these yuppies, until they lose materialism, they will never fight. I'm going to maintain that strongly. Materialism will keep them addicted to their life.
Right, but you're thinking boomer. Don't think boomer. Think fucking 30-year-old who doesn't have a pot to piss in.
Yeah, 30-year-old guy for sure. He has nothing to lose.
I mean, I personally can't take the government serious anymore just on the fact that it's obsession with fucking faggots. I mean, so for me to be gushy-eyed over the Stars and Stripes is laughable because I know the message is not coming from America, but a foreign entity. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's 500,000 street gang members worldwide. I mean, I'm sorry, nationwide. They're not stupid. Gangs aren't stupid.
Yeah, but gangs are. The problem with gangs is they generally live in urban areas. They're not capable of living in country areas. They're not self-sufficient.
No, they're not. You're right about that.
Mexican street gangs, they don't go out in the country and run their operation. They do it within New York or wherever city they're living in.
All right, let's move on. Let's go to phase 3.
You're so obsessed with all these steps, like this guy is preaching the Bible, you know?
It's a phenomenal writing.
Mm-hmm. Go to step 3. I'm going to hear it.
Oh, you're reading it. Hold on.
I'll let you read it.
Okay. Let me
Eating some I'm eating beans. Beans are all I'm going to be able to eat in this new world.
Yeah, I'm about to after this I'll probably call it a night. All right, phase 3. The establishment will acquiesce to gang and militia control of some areas which are entirely but unofficially abandoned by police or military. The establishment will endeavor to co-opt some gangs and militias by making them de facto security forces, and the federal security forces will mount outright military search and destroy assaults against those who don't disband or cooperate. The military and the police will patrol occupied ghettos and other areas with armed vehicles, something like Northern Ireland. The use of heavy weapons by both sides will be common. That's 1. 2, Mexico will enter a period of chaos, civil war, and starvation. Cross-border guerrilla raids from Mexico will occur, some with the support of the Mexican government. Full-time guerrilla bands will appear in the Southwest and other areas. 3, radical and ethnically oriented parties will win local and even state elections. 4, car and truck bombs will become common. Assassinations of police officers and minor politicians will become common. 5, multiple day tribal riots with barricades and siege of police station will become common. We already saw that. 6, gangs will become primarily political in their goals and shift into paramilitary mode. 7, the first instances of medium-scale ethnic cleansing will occur. 8, there will be mutinies in the military, firefights for control of military bases, and the conversion of military bases into fire bases will begin. A Soviet-style federal internal security force with heavy weapons will be created to quash riots, break strikes, track down guerrillas, smash mutinies by the police and military, and to battle urban gangs grown into armies. Firefights between police and different ethnic groups in towns will become common. 9, a general nationwide flight of persons out of areas in which there's ethnic groups is not a majority will occur. De facto secession will occur as cities and suburbs will be sealed off in adjunct areas. So
It'll be scrotal on scrotal violence, right?
but yeah, scrotal on scrotal violence. No mention of women. Mostly guys will have to suffer on this.
Yeah, that's what that goes to the MGTOWs. Like, oh yeah, wait till these women see this. Yeah, no, I think men will be the first to get off in this. Oh, let's pray that this doesn't happen. I'm praying to the Lord that it doesn't get.
No, it gets better. Phase 4. Phase 4 is probably my favorite. Phase 4 is the front will form. Phase 4, all-out continuous warfare. This phase will be marked by multiple day riots that the federal military cannot crush in all cases. The front will appear. Radical or mutinous militaries will seize the federal government. This will be temporary affair as America itself will vanish. States will secede from the Union. There will be a war with Mexico. Large-scale food shortages will occur and even starvation as a global depression takes hold. Massive ethnic cleansing will occur as new nations emerge. Occupation by UN troops is a possibility. Concentration camps, rape camps, and even death camps will appear as war becomes total. Eventually, the war will subside as the new nations fix their boundaries according to the military reality. Peace and new boundaries are formalized by treaties, and the war will end. Our society has become so fragile. Let me finish.
Hey, go ahead.
I'm getting congested. I don't know why. Our society has become so fragile that it is no longer withstand the shocks that it withstood in the past, such as war. Oh, sorry. Our society has become so fragile that it is no longer withstand the shocks that it withstood in the past, such as war, depression, revolution in Mexico, and the lack of relief for the unemployed. If these calamities should ever again test America all at once, America will surely topple into Civil War II. The phase of continuous street gangs and minority militias will set up barricades, lay siege to police stations, take over television stations, capture entire cities, raise revolutionary flags, and demand negotiations with the federal government for financial relief of the cities and redress of racial injustice. Oh, that's funny. The president will declare a state of emergency and mobilize every military resource to crush the rebellion. Heavy weapons will be liberally used in street fighting, and many minority civilians will be killed in retake the few cities that are retaken. Retaking the few cities that are
It sounds
retaken.
like
Most rebel cities will be on hold, will hold on, defended by massive but unorganized minority militias, street gangs turned into armies, rebel police departments, and rebellious minority-dominated military units. All the remaining military units will be divided along ethnic lines. That is definitely something that would happen. Firefights will... what? Did you leave? You there?
Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Go ahead. I didn't leave. I'm right here.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
The front will appear radical or mutiny. Oh, I've already read that part. Sorry, hold on. I lost it. Most rebel cities will hold off defending massive but unorganized military militias. Street gangs turned into armies. Rebel police departments and rebellious minority-dominated military units. All remaining military units will divide along ethnic lines. That's where I was. Firefights will erupt, and firefights will erupt. Food. Today, our food producing system in North America is high-tech, specialized, and dispersed. Electrical power for our farms is usually generated many miles away. Fuel and spare parts for the farm machinery are likewise produced at great distances from our farms, often overseas. That is for sure. I forgot about the power grid in farms because of the mechanization of agriculture.
Right. I agree that I've said this before that farm areas are going to be screwed the most because they depend on a lot of technologies that they can't maintain. You can't farm without gasoline, fertilizer, electricity. And if they run out of that stuff, they don't really have a means to which to generate it. There's a lady by the name of her name is I forget what her name is. She's in California. She's saying that the goal is to push us back to the 1700s.
Yeah, that's part of the Green New Deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it's possible to go back to the 1700s without there being a culling of the population. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you put a lot of emphasis in this guy's book. I mean, you're reading a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of variables involved in that too. He's acting like he knows every step that's going to happen, and he doesn't. He's just assuming that this will happen. It's his vision, but just because it's his vision, like William Pierce wrote the Turner Diaries, that doesn't mean his vision's correct. You know what I'm saying? It's just it's just a of what he sees, you know.
But, if we look back the past 30 years, I mean, you had Ruby Ridge, you had Waco, then recently you had the Oregon Ranchers, what happened up in Oregon. You remember all that bullshit under Obama. I mean, it's no secret the government has laid siege to cultists and cut off their food and electricity, blared horrible noises at them, restricted their access to the media.
Right.
They couldn't broadcast their message. They couldn't get their message out. I mean,
Right.
Trump gets silenced on Twitter. He can't get his message out. I mean, that's part of his own
Well, you know
undoing. He's an idiot.
You know what is going to help people with ham radios? You want to have point-to-point walkie-talkies that you can solar charge, because the point-to-point communication is going to be the only off-the-grid thing you're going to have for communication. So, like, they make these. They're called FRS. It stands for Family Radio Services, and they have up to 22 channels. You may want to invest in a pair of those. They're about $50 for two, and you can talk up to 3-4 miles on them, and they're really cool. So you may want to invest in a pair of FRS walkie-talkies. You can get
I'm
them
investing in Hot Pockets.
Yeah.
Okay, I want my porno in Hot Pockets. God damn it.
Yeah. Well, Hot Pockets will get you so far, you know.
They will, as long as they still have power.
Right. I guess you're pretty optimistic that you're not going to lose power, right? Well, I'm hearing a lot of these preppers are saying that the grid's going to shut down in the next month. What do you think of that? You think that's
No.
no?
They
I
keep
don't think it is.
timelines on these things. Now, this guy said 2020 will be the first sign of Civil War II, and he's 100% right.
Yeah,
I mean, he's definitely hit the nail on the head with a lot of these fucking topics. There's no question about it. You know, you listening to Tom. Tom says that it's going to be rural and suburbs versus the urban versus the city folk, and there's only so much that the urban and suburban can keep subsidizing these city dwellers, and that's a fact. The city is a byproduct of the wealth created by the rural folk. If we go back to Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge, his main focus was on the city. He says the city is where all the rotten filth is. Granted, that spilled over into a fucking full blown genocide and ethnic conflict, but
so he went after the farmers, right?
no, he went after the people living in the cities.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I should know my history
No,
better.
no, no, it's okay. He emptied the cities and killed everyone that lived in the capital and another city in the northern part. So he
Yeah,
emptied the cities and killed off the people that were considered intellectual or cosmopolitan.
yeah,
Right. So if we take a look, what happened during this past election, every minority that lived in the urban centers voted for Biden, and all
right,
the corruption stems from the city centers. All the
right.
decadence
Yeah,
in our
sure.
society stems from the cities, mostly San Francisco and New York City for the most part.
Isn't it amazing how these people have such a hive brain? Like there's that you would think that you might have 50% conservative, 50% liberal. Isn't it amazing how liberals are all hive brained?
What do you mean?
They all school teachers predominantly are Democrats. They're
Well, that's
all
because they work for the public sector.
right, but you would think that they could still make money off the public sector and still be conservative, but that's not the case.
Right.
No.
No. I mean, once you develop this habit of examining events from the Civil War II's perspective, you will see more clearly the dangerous trends in our society that converge into Civil War II, and that these trends are both accelerating and mutually reinforcing. Do not delude yourself into thinking that the government will correct these dangerous trends prior to them getting completely out of hand. And things are certainly getting out of hand, are they not?
Yeah, they are, and we don't. Sometimes we don't know. We can't put a finger on it. Um, it's really hard to put a finger on stuff because you hear all these. There's so many different people writing.
Whoop, breaking up a bit.
Oh, hold on. Sorry, I'm looking at this one guy. This guy on Israeli News Live, he says it appears Trump's inner circle is attempting a coup. I hear all this stuff, but I have no reason to believe it's true.
No.
Yeah. I mean, he's always got there's a few websites that try to promote this alternative news. They say, oh, well, Trump's on the side of the people, and then he's not on the side. And it's hard to make any sense of anything on these sites. I kind of think it's a lot of BS.
Yeah, I do too. But I tell you what, if they don't end these lockdowns and shit, you'll see something come of it.
Yeah.
Like I said, the COVID mandates, these memorandums that the governors are wheeling out and city delegates and councils, they're incoherent. Why should I be home at 9 o'clock? Makes no fucking sense whatsoever.
Right.
Then you have the vaccine. Then you have the instability of the election. I mean, for the first time, we had this president-elect fucking administration. That's never happened before.
Right.
I got one for you. Where's Joe Biden? Where is he?
Well, he's getting his phony vaccine, the sugar pill vaccine.
But he's not on TV. He's nowhere to be found. He looks senile. He looks like an old man.
Well, he's 78. He better look old.
So we're going to have a president that's going to be in his 80s.
basically 82 if he gets out. I don't see this going 4 years. How's an 82-year-old man? Even Ronald Reagan was senile before he even turned 70. You know, I mean, he was already senile.
I know. I know. Yeah, and again, he's nowhere to be found.
Right. This is a joke. This whole thing is comical because neither of these candidates, Trump and Biden, have been talking about anything in the public forum. They're going like incognito.
Yeah, they're nowhere to be found. You're right. There's no leadership.
It's almost like they're planning the next strategy. The idea that Trump might stay in power is very possible. It's very
No, I don't think so.
You think that he will
That's
eventually?
a Hail Mary pass, and it's looking sadder and sadder as we get closer and closer to
Yeah, but that doesn't
Inauguration
mean
Day.
anything because we can't believe anything in this media. We know that the election was stolen. It was stolen in 5 different states. They all magically came up with these 500,000 votes in all these states in a matter of 4 hours. I mean, it's just crazy.
Right, and then again, people still think there's some type of rule of law. Rule of law is getting thrown right out the window, and you just said it best, is that it's comical. It's comical, which means what? Is that no one wants to listen to the government anymore, and that's part of the phase that this guy was pontificating in his book.
This is clown world. This is clown world we're living in.
I call it Pennywise world.
Pennywise world. Why is that?
Who's Pennywise?
I don't know who's Pennywise.
For the clown from the movie It.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I just call it clown world. It's easier. This is
what you'll see is that you'll see BitChute get terminated. You'll see more internet censorship. I think things like that will definitely start. I mean, you told me you got a strike this past week. I had a strike over a chat I did a long time ago. So,
well, they give you strikes and they give you warnings, and then you got to make decisions, and it's not a good thing because then they can take all your work down permanently. You know.
Yeah, 100%.
You gotta find alternative platforms for this crap because it's just getting pretty bad.
Well, again, I boil it back to some just basic fundamentals, is that if the family unit doesn't survive, the nation's not going to survive, and you're going to see all-out fucking anarchy.
Right. I don't think I don't. Boy, I'll tell you, right now we're still eating. I don't see Mr. Joe Harley Davidson still driving his Harley.
Boomer. That's boomer, dude. Post-boomer. 5 years. Give it 5 years, and then they won't have enough. They won't have the energy to ride around on a Harley anymore.
No, boomers are outliving most people. They're outliving their children.
Yeah, correct. That's true. But if we take a look at the stock market, well, who's riding that wave? It's mostly boomers.
Yeah,
and it's a way of pacifying them, not to cause any waves, because they still hold a lot of the power, whether we like it or not, in the United States. Again, Joe Biden 78, Trump is boomer through and through. Nancy Pelosi's in her 80s. Dianne Feinstein is 87. These people are just not letting go.
Right. Maxine Waters is 81. No, you're right. They're not letting go.
Right. And they're not making room for the young people. In fact, what are they doing? They're telling young people you can't go out past 9 o'clock, and we're shutting down your business and what little you have.
You know what? Nobody. That's another white elephant in the room, is the age factor of the decision makers. They're all people born before 1950. That's haunting when you think about that. We are being controlled by a bunch of elites that are not only part of high organized criminal behavior, but they are all born before 50. That's creepy. That is really creepy. There is something that's got to be said about that.
Let me read this last part, and then I'll call it a night. Okay. Gangs and militias will control lucrative black markets and protection rackets, giving them much incentive to reject peace. If Civil War II breaks out during a severe economic downturn, which is almost certain, many unemployed men will find it a dramatic improvement in their lives. America is awash in unemployed young men who are economically useless due to their lack of capital and marketable skills. This is obviously true. While utterly useless in their economic sense, they are definitely assets in the military acquisition because vigorous, motivated, and aggressive young males are exactly what are needed in an infantry combat. This study neglect of economically useless young males will continue because the economic establishment considers any investment in them a drain on their precious corporate profits, and they import H-1B1 non-immigrant foreigners rather than invest in young Americans. Ironic as it may seem, the establishment is actively assembling their very army that will cut their throats. But it is not. It won't be merely for worldly gain or revenge that these young men will fight to their deaths in Civil War II. It will be for something noble, for something basic to higher human nature, no matter how perversely manifested. No matter how previously manifested. They will be self-motivated by a sense of purpose that is now entirely absent from their dismal and aimless lives. These young males of all races have grievances, real grievances, a lot of them. They also have guns, real guns, a lot of them. As the ancient Chinese curse goes, may you live in interesting times. Well, I fully accept that the sole virtue of multi-ethnic American empire will be decided absent of boredom.
Wow, scary stuff.
Right?
So
And what did you always tell me? Who's Antifa?
a bunch of white guys that are incels that have no
Right?
sex, and
That
that's what
haven't had their peepees touched in a long time.
or ever. Yeah, I know what you're saying. How do you think? What do you think? How do you think they find these guys? Like, where do you think they recruit them from? How is it done? Do you
I
think?
don't think they're really at college bookstores.
So you think that it's got to be done on a very sophisticated level. Am I correct? Or
I mean, the people that organize it, yeah.
yeah,
You know, I think the guy who, the head of like the Socialist Communist Party in New York, he did selfies with Mayor de Blasio, and he has a picture of him doing a selfie with Paul McCartney of the Beatles.
oh God, did this?
Uh,
These people are really they're actually well connected. Then
yes, 100%.
you think guys like Paul McCartney are commies too? In at the end of the
No, I
day,
mean, look, the thing was when I saw him do that selfie was on Twitter, is that he has the ability to access these people and to do a selfie. I can't do a selfie with Paul McCartney. I don't have access to doing a selfie with Mayor Bill de Blasio, but Bill de Blasio was obviously at some fucking some social justice warrior event where he was able to meet this person who is rounding up people to try to antagonize the middle class in suburban neighborhoods.
right?
Oh,
Unbelievable.
and he was a graduate of Columbia University. We all know about Columbia University.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm learning more about Eastern Europe between 1930 and 1950, and what happened to Ukraine, and the social planners of the Soviet Union were basically college professors. They were retarded. They knew absolutely nothing about farming. And what do? They kill the farmers.
Yeah. Well, that's what they did. It was all urban rabble that killed the Ukrainian farmers. Those weren't like peasants killing peasants. They always bring in the urban people to do this. These people are pieces of shit.
I know. And they think their cause is just. And
Yeah.
who's leading the forefront? It's white girl. No, you have to let the Somalis in.
Yeah.
And no one says no to them. Why? Well, because you want to bang her.
those. Oh, I don't know. It's insane. I don't know what kind of parents do you think raise those kind of girls though? Like, do
Well,
you think?
definitely no father in the house or he's absent. My cousin's all about trainee rights out of nowhere. Just on board for letting, trainees are should be astronauts and shit. And I can tell you that my uncle, he just doesn't counter any of her bullshit, and nor does her boyfriend.
Uh-huh.
Because you don't want to hear her nag.
Yeah, but he acquiesces that he doesn't fight her.
I don't think so. No.
No, because this is what scrotal sacks do.
Yep. Yeah, it's not, and again, you just don't want to hear it. You just don't want to argue, and that's another part of the problem is that no one wants to argue with people that think Drag Time Story Hour is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'll let you go. You sound pretty tired. I'm getting tired myself.
Yeah, I'm gonna get some sleep. I want to watch some sports highlights, and then I'm gonna get my mind off of all this negativity.
What sports are you going to be watching?
Oh, the Cleveland Browns are kicking ass. They're on the verge of winning their division, and I'm real excited because Cleveland hasn't been a winning team in a long time, so I'm kind of excited about it.
Since Marty Schottenheimer.
Yeah, Marty Schottenheimer. You remember those days, don't you?
No, I was not alive then, but I know who Marty Schottenheimer is.
Yeah, he was a coach. He coached a few teams, but he coached the Browns in the '80s. And I was alive enough to remember. I actually went to those games in my teen years. But yeah, it was an exciting time. The Browns.
Well, they lost in horrible fashion. I remember they lost. I think the Denver Broncos. They lost to twice.
They lost that one drive. They lost three out of 4 years. Once they both games came down to the wire. The first two games came down to the wire and they lost them, and then they lost pretty badly in Denver in 1989 or 90. So yeah, it was pretty. We've had bad luck with Denver, but we're not playing Denver anymore. So.
Well, Marty Schottenheimer, I think, talk about selling your soul to the devil. He always lost those conference games, even when he was with the San Diego Chargers with LaDainian Tomlinson and Phillip Rivers. I remember that game against the Patriots in 2006. He came down to the wire. He lost, and I think he got fired after that game.
Yeah. He was a good coach in the '80s, but he had the reason why the Browns let him go is Art Modell. He wanted Kurt Schottenheimer was the brother of Marty. He wanted to keep his brother on the team, and Modell wanted to fire him, and they had a falling out. So right after that, he went to the Chiefs, and I think he got him to the playoffs, but he never won a playoff game. I don't think he was always blew it in the playoffs. He was really actually we won in the playoffs with him. We made it to 3 AFC title games with him, but it was never enough to get us into the Super Bowl.
Right, and then 15 years ago, he took over the San Diego Chargers, and he lost again in the conference game.
Yeah,
the Browns have a horrible history.
I think he's got dementia now. He's actually got Alzheimer's now. He's like 75 or 77.
Yeah, he's up there. He's fucking old, man.
Yeah, he was a good coach, but he's a very German looking. He played for the Buffalo Bills as a linebacker, I think. But anyways, yeah, the Browns they got a good coach. And we're kicking ass, and I'm looking forward to this Sunday. They're playing the New York Jets, your team. And the Jets, they've only won one game this whole year.
Yeah, the Jets are pretty bad. What's the Browns' record right now?
They're 10-4.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, they're 10 and they're let me see, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yeah, 10-4. And here's the deal. Pittsburgh has already lost 3 straight, but they won 11, their first 11. If Pittsburgh loses in the Browns win this week, we're going to play them for the division title on Monday Night Football in like January 2nd or 3rd. So this is going to be exciting because the Pittsburgh will probably lose to the Baltimore Colts or the Indianapolis Colts because the Colts are a real good team this year. So
they have Phillip Rivers as their QB. The Colts.
They got Phillip Rivers now, and Phillip Rivers is a beast. I mean, he's a good player. But
I love Phillip Rivers.
Yeah,
you want to talk about hillbillies here? There, we're gonna get them, boys. I love Phillip Rivers. He's fucking awesome.
Yeah, him and his wife were virgins till marriage. They waited,
and they have like 8 kids or some shit.
They're both Roman Catholic, but They waited till they were married, and they said that that was their style of doing it. That's pretty damn good for a ball player to be just with one woman their whole. I mean, that's most of these guys go through women like they're going out of style, you know.
Well, Philip Rivers, he's part of that whole. He was. What did he get drafted? First or second behind Eli Manning? And that was a great drafting because it came Ben Roethlisberger, Eli, and Philip Rivers are the three QBs that year that came out.
The 2004 draft was a beast of a draft. And then, I forget who else came out of that 2004 draft. There were a couple busts in that draft, but there were some mostly good players. But those QBs, all three of those guys are going to the Hall of Fame, you know?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I don't know about Philip Rivers. He's got to get that ring. He's got to get a ring, man.
That's going to hold him back. You know, he wasn't going to do it with the Chargers. He's probably got a good chance. The Browns could still technically, if the Browns lose 2 straight, they could find themselves in a very bad position where they would be 10-6 in the playoffs, but they would be a low ranked. But we beat the Colts. We beat Philip Rivers earlier this year, so we have a chance. If we have a chance. We definitely the Colts have definitely got to win this game, and we got to beat the Jets too. And which the Jets we should have no problem with. I don't know. Sam Darnold's not doing too well. So
who's the quarterback for the Browns?
Oh, Baker Mayfield. Everybody made fun of the guy. The guy is he's like one of the top 4 quarterbacks now. He's actually got himself off the ground. He's doing really well. He's only like 6 foot tall. He's not like one of these 6'4" guys. But the guy for who's the guy for the Seahawks? He's only 5'11". Yeah, he's only 5'11". So the era of the 6'5" quarterback is not it's not required anymore. There's some really good quarterbacks out there now.
Well, the problem with guys that are under 6 foot as QBs, they have to roll out of the pocket to see, which Russell Wilson is very good at. There's been a lot of quarterbacks that have been under 6 foot. Doug Flutie was like 5'8" or some shit.
Yeah, and Baker Mayfield runs out of the pocket too. He doesn't stay in the pocket. He runs around. So when he makes the shot, when he throws the ball, he's already got good visual of the receiver out there. But you're right. You really need the height. If you're going to go in the pocket, you really need to have height for sure.
Yeah, there's you'll see a resurgence of those type of quarterbacks. It's really being a quarterback is more about being intelligent and predicting the future. So those days are like Drew Bledsoe, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, where you kind of just like this lumbering 6'7" fucking with a bazooka for an arm. You have to have a really good offensive line to protect you. And the game changes now. It's all about the scrambling quarterback. But those guys, they don't last that long. They can't stay healthy because they're constantly getting fucking hit. So if you have a guy that's 6'7" and 230 pounds, big ass fucking white dude or whatever, who can't run out of the pocket, those guys. You might see them come back in the future, but it goes back to having a really good offensive line to protect.
You got to be able to get the hell out of the way when a big lineman's coming at you. You got to be able to get the hell out of the way. And the old style was you just drop back and throw the ball, but you got to have the mobility. Actually, Peyton Manning, I was surprised how mobile he was for a big guy. He could scramble very well. Actually, he was able to get around. And that's why he's got the most touchdowns of all time,
Well, he also had a phenomenal offensive line, and he had a good running back and a good wide receiver for like 10 years. He was horrible this last season. It was a miracle that he was able to get a Super Bowl win his last season.
Yeah, that was amazing. He did get one his last season. He sure did. He got one, and he did pretty. So it was, but he didn't get the MVP that game either. So.
Well, if you look at a lot of these scrambling quarterbacks, again, they don't really last that long. The only really good one was Michael Vick, but Michael Vick was more of an athlete than he was a quarterback. And he was so fucking great, Michael Vick. I really do think he was underrated. And in hindsight, we kind of overlooked how awesome he really was. If he really had a good team around him, in which he did towards the end of his career with the Eagles, and he just hated his offensive line because they did not protect him. I remember one game where he was spitting up blood. He was just fucking screaming at his offensive line for not protecting him. He was awesome.
Yeah, Michael Vick was good. Yeah, he was. It's amazing in that short. If he wouldn't have gotten involved in that dog scandal, I think he would have kept a pretty consistent career.
Yeah, 100%. I also was a big fan of like those type of quarterbacks, Randall Cunningham, which is more of your generation.
Yeah, I remember Rand. He took over for Ron Jaworski of the Eagles, and then he eventually was traded to another team. But yeah, Randall Cunningham was a beast. Yeah, he was a great. He's got almost 30,000 yards. He's a real good quarterback.
Well, he's second all time in rushing yards for a quarterback, and
Oh, I
he
didn't
did
know that.
that being the most sacked quarterback that season too. So if you were to taken out the sacks, he would have rushed for like 1,500 yards as a quarterback in one season.
Oh my God, you serious?
And don't forget, 10 years later, after that season, he went on the Vikings in 1998 to have one of the greatest offenses of all time with Randy Moss.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, he did. He had a great. Yeah, he did it for. And then Warren Moon was another good quarterback. You don't remember him from the '80s, and he went through
I
the
saw him
'90s.
for the tail end of his career when he was with the Seahawks.
Yeah.
But
Well,
he
Warren
didn't go anywhere either. He didn't win shit.
he got 49. He had over 49,000 yards, and he didn't start playing in the NFL till he was like in his mid to late 20s because he was in the CFL. But then he came to the Oilers and he played. But that guy's got 49,000 yards. I mean, that's more than Fran Tarkenton had. I mean, this guy was a beast. But he never had the team. He was a passing court. The Oilers were all a passing team. They weren't a running team at the time when he was on there. So, but
Yeah. Yeah.
he was a
And speaking of quarterbacks, everyone talks like how great Dan Marino was. While Dan Marino was the quarterback, not one of his running backs rushed for over 1,000 yards while he was at
yeah,
the helm.
always a passing team. That's how it always worked with the. They couldn't protect him either. They didn't have a good offensive line. They were the most underrated team. The problem was they didn't have any good guys that could run for 1,000 yards. They had that Mark Duper and Mark Clayton of the 80s.
Or was it the fact that Dan Marino was a ball hog?
It might have been too. Well, what do you mean by a ball hog?
He just didn't want to. He didn't want to have a good running back.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's possible. Well, Don Shula should have known that. That's the thing that Don Shula is a Hall of Fame coach. He should have been able to step in and figure out we need a fucking running back, you know?
Well, again, maybe the owners were like, "No, we have to let Dan Marino throw for 50 times in a game."
Yeah. He finished with 61. For the longest time, he had the most yards, like 61,000, but he's been surpassed. Now it's nothing to get 70,000 yards. I think there's, I don't know, 3 people now that have over 70,000 yards. Drew Brees, I think, has still got the most yards right now. I don't know how by much, but Drew Brees, I'd like to see him retire with the most yards, but it looks like Brady's going to get it.
Well, Tom Brady shits all over fucking Drew Brees.
Yeah.
Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback ever, whether we want to admit it or not. There's no question about it.
Belichick didn't do shit with Cleveland except for 1 year. The thing was Belichick rode on Brady. Brady didn't ride on Belichick. Belichick rode on the reins of Brady, and that's just the fact.
They complemented each other.
Yeah, I think so. I think they did. I'm not taking away because Belichick's got 2 Super Bowl rings as a defensive coordinator with the Giants. So yeah, he did. He had 2 years with the Giants as a defensive coordinator. So I wouldn't take his head coaching, but Tom Brady, man, that was a 6th round draft pick. You talk about stepping on a piece of shit and smelling like a rose.
Well, under Parcells, you had Bill Belichick as the defensive coordinator. Do you know who the wide receiver coach was?
No, who was it? Romeo Crennel. Okay, Romeo Crennel was on that team too, wasn't he? I think he was special teams coach.
Romeo Crennel, he was always tight with Parcells, who also became the Cleveland Browns head coach for a while.
Yeah, he did.
And,
yeah.
You also had Sean Payton, I think, as like a special teams assistant or some shit because he just retired from being being a backup quarterback to the Bears. So yeah, that Giants team in the late '80s, early '90s under the Bill Parcells coaching tree, all those guys became so successful as head coaches.
And Lawrence Taylor's life went to shit afterwards, but my brother says he's the best linebacker of all time. He says he doesn't know anybody better than him.
Everyone talks about him being a beast. Phil Simms. I love Phil Simms as a commentator. I really enjoy him. I love football, man. I love football players and stuff. I really don't pay attention to it anymore because of all the wokeness involved in the NFL now.
Yeah.
And most of my favorite players don't play anymore. I don't really pay attention nearly as much. But I was really enamored with sports growing up. So
Yeah, I was the New York Jets were a pretty good team in the '80s. They had some good moments, and I remember all the like Wesley Walker and Al Toon and Johnny Hector and Richard Todd. I mean, you probably you don't remember that team, but I remember watching that team. I've been to many Browns games against the Jets. It was a really exciting time.
now the Jets are horrible.
Yeah, well, I thought they had a chance when they had Sanchez, but he kind of floundered. He made it to an AFC Championship game though.
Twice he made it.
Oh, he made it twice to an AFC
Yeah.
Championship. Yeah, one with the Steelers, I think. And
fuck me, I can't remember. That's like 10 years ago.
yeah, it was against the Steelers was one of them. And but I know I thought he was going to be their franchise, but he kind of fizzled out.
You know what it is? The Jets are like the Republicans and Trump. They play not to lose. They don't play to win.
They have never had a team that was dominant since I think maybe that first couple years that Joe Namath coached them. But even with Joe Namath, the Jets kind of fizzled after that. They didn't after that they won that Super Bowl. They never really did that great.
No, when Parcells took over in '98, that was probably their best team in the past 30
That's
years.
like Vinny Testaverde left, and Vinny Testaverde was their head quarterback, and he
blew out his Achilles tendon on like the first game, and that was the end of the 1999 season, and then that was the end of it. And then I think Parcells retired. Then he came back with the Cowboys, and then he retired.
98 was a good year for Testaverde. He did pretty good that year. I think.
Oh yeah, Testaverde was a beast. He was another great quarterback. I think he was kind of underrated, and he got stuck on a lot of shitty teams.
Yeah, well, he played for the Browns. That was when they got rid of Kosar, and that was pretty. I remember when that happened. I was initially in the Army at the time, but Kosar, it was kind of sad because he thought he was going to retire. But guess what? Here's asshole Art Modell gets rid of him, gives him to the Cowboys. And he winds up, and Kosar gets a Super Bowl ring that same year.
Gotta go to Modell's.
Yeah. It was pretty exciting. That'd be awesome to have a Super Bowl ring, even if you're a backup quarterback, you know?
Oh yeah, I mean, regardless, you were still part of it. You still contributed in one way or another. I always, for whatever reason, I was fascinated with Super Bowl teams that lost because the past 20 years, for whatever reason, teams that lost the Super Bowls the following season, they were like horrible. Yeah. And I always found that fascinating. Like, how do you get to the Super Bowl and then you're just total fucking the next season?
Atlanta Falcons 4 years ago blew that Super Bowl. They were up 28-3, and they fucked that game up. They just
lost to the Patriots, right?
Yeah, and I watched that game, and I said throughout the whole game, I says, I know they're going to blow this lead. Gostkowski even missed an extra point, and they had to get two-point conversions on their touchdowns. It was terrible. There was no excuse to lose that game. They blew that game.
Yeah, Falcons always had a bad. Yeah, and then how good are the? Do they still have that quarterback? What's his name? Sims.
Ryan something or other. Ryan. Matt Ryan. Yeah, he's still there. I think he's pushing over 50,000 yards, but he's not. I don't think he'll ever get to the Super Bowl again. I just don't. I don't. It's sad, but that was they had their chance and they blew it. But you're right. The next year they sucked.
Yeah, look at the '98 Falcons. Remember that? The Dirty Birds.
Yeah, the Dirty Birds. I watched that. I was in Savannah, Georgia when that game was played. That was John Elway's last season, and I remember Tim Dwight ran a touchdown or at the half or something. But I watched that game. But yeah, they just weren't good enough to beat the Denver Broncos. You know.
Well, yeah, Jamal Anderson, and the following season, I think he blew both of his ACLs. Terrell Davis blew his ACL. And for whatever reason, when running backs go over 300 carries a season, the following season they blow their knees out. I find that quite fascinating. I find the endurance of certain athletes, like again that stat of 300 carries following season blown ACL. Like, okay, so obviously there's a limit to how much their knees can endure in one season, and then if another like 6 months later their bodies give out on them.
Because it doesn't matter how strong you are, you're being hit constantly. and it's a brutal game, football, and you're only one injury away from like Odell Beckham was, since we lost the Browns lost Odell Beckham early in the season, the Browns have won most of their games. Odell Beckham was the cancer on that team.
Odell Beckham's a nightmare. Why do you think the Giants got rid of him?
Yeah, well, the Browns got a nightmare because see, the Browns fired Kitchens because he finished with a 6-10 record. I think that the thorn in the side of that fucking team was Odell Beckham. He wants the ball constantly. So after Odell Beckham got hurt early in that game against Cincinnati, he had a record performance. He threw to 5 different like receivers for touchdowns. Like, I mean, it was amazing. Or like it was just amazing how his game changed just getting Odell out of the game. Odell is a distraction on that team, and everybody says it. It's not working. Odell's going to have a hard time once he recovers from this ACL. The guaranteed money, he won't get it anymore. He's a ball hog. He wants to keep the ball for himself. I don't think he's going to get 10,000.
Yeah, I fucking hated Odell Beckham. I was so happy to see him leave. I was pretty happy to see that tool bag fucking go. And that's the thing. In football, you can't be a prima donna. It doesn't work that way. In basketball, you can do it. You can't do it in football because it's more team-oriented. You there? I guess he's gone. Well, that's the end of the stream or the recording. Sorry, not the stream. I can't talk sports with Ian, so that's fun to talk sports with someone for a change. Me and Ian planned to do a chat on baseball, but we never got around to it. Ian was a big baseball buff, but part of our plan was to do a live stream while watching Yankees Blue Jays game and talk sports, but we never got around to it. So that was nice. Hoca talked a little sports with me. All right, guys. Thank you. Have a good one.